floating in an endless void, a dark realization echoes that a person never gets a redo in life. The somber truth resonates further, acknowledging that even an existence burdened with regrets cannot be reversed. However, a desperate spark of hope emerges at the sheer possibility of a second chance. Suddenly, the philosophical void shatters as desperate voices beg for immediate salvation. Amidst the murmurs of a gossiping crowd, young children humiliate themselves by bowing flat on the ground. Ignoring the bewildered whispers, the sweating man suddenly deduces that he is a transmigrator. He realizes this because his flashing past life memories perfectly match the world of a super popular game called Bright Fantasy. Unfortunately, his actual knowledge of the narrative is virtually non-existent since he bought the game but never broke the seal. His only useful memory is that the combat functions as a standard command-style RPG. He also vaguely recalls a branching romance system where choices dictated which of the many heroines the player married. Beyond those fragmented memories, he knows this world operates on classic sword and sorcery mechanics. His final, highly specific piece of trivia is that the main protagonist's default name was Asuka. Cursing his naturally intimidating face, the man concludes he has reincarnated as an evil background character named Gray. Looking down at the street, Gray quietly contemplates the children still groveling at his feet. Lacking any knowledge of his predetermined narrative role, he reveals he simply chose the life of an adventurer. He reflects on the honorable nature of adventurers who gather at guilds to resolve daily quests. He mentally outlines the tedious ranking system that progresses from E up to A, complete with annoying plus and minus modifiers. Ignoring the finer guild rules, he focuses on the rigid trials required to rank up, like completing 3 consecutive quests. Through diligent effort, he mastered both the sword and a versatile array of support and attack magic. Now, he stands proudly as a respected B-rank adventurer capable of holding his own anywhere. Snapping back to the present, Gray groans at the judgmental onlookers and desperately begs the children to stop their degeezer. He glares at the whispering crowd, immensely irritated that everyone assumes he is a human trafficker based purely on his villainous looks. The situation escalates rapidly as the desperate children beg him to use his magic to heal their sick family member. Gray's mind flashes back to a brutal memory of someone kicking away a flower that a child desperately tried to sell. The intense flashback solidifies the harsh reality of how the weak and impoverished are treated in this world. Returning to the moment, Gray softens his imposing stance and asks if their sick relative is a parent or sibling. The child tragically explains that they are orphans and the sick person is just a friend they live with. Gray mentally notes the grim reality that his recovery magic only mends physical injuries, while curing illness requires a church priest. Yielding to their relentless pleas, he agrees to help as the children bow again in immense gratitude. He warns them he isn't certain he can cure the illness, but offers to try using his personal stash of potions. Brushing off the topic of money, he gently tells them they can pay him back whenever they are able. The children simply stare up at him in complete, stunned silence. Gray jumps back in absolute shock as the kids suddenly burst into hysterical, grateful tears. Panicking as they explain how rare it is for adults to show them kindness, Gray realizes he is now fully committed to saving their friend. Walking through the bustling streets, the group heads toward the slums with a newfound sense of hope. Trying to lighten the mood during the walk, Gray officially introduces himself as an adventurer. A young girl introduces herself as Fio, before gesturing to the boy beside her who cheerfully calls himself Isuka. Gray freezes completely in his tracks, paralyzed by the sudden revelation of the boy's identity. Staring at the innocent child, Gray realizes with mounting dread that he just befriended the world's main protagonist. Sweating bullets, Gray mentally panics because reborn villains who stick to the main story always die, and he has absolutely no idea how to survive this encounter. Resolving to act according to his conscience, he decides to simply move forward and see what happens. Despite knowing that getting involved with the protagonist could lead to his death, he refuses to live with regrets and resolves to help the children anyway. Reaching their rundown destination, Isuka tells the adventurer to wait while he goes inside to explain the situation to the others. The dilapidated wooden door creaks open as the young boy steps into the shadowy building. Standing outside the makeshift home on the outskirts of the slums, Gray glances around the area until a small voice calls out to him. Looking down, he asks Fio why she waited outside with him instead of heading inside with Isuka. She bows deeply to express her profound gratitude, but he gruffly tells her to save her thanks until after he actually helps her family. When she insists on thanking him just for listening to them, he points out that he could easily be a villain planning to sell them all as slaves. Unfazed by his dark warning, Fio smiles and notes that a truly bad person would never warn their victims like that. He silently scoffs at her naivety, knowing she has absolutely no logical basis to trust a stranger like him. Despite his cynical inner thoughts, a small part of him feels genuinely happy to receive her innocent trust. Noticing his intense and brooding silence, the young girl worriedly asks if she has upset him. Snapping out of his thoughts, he quickly reassures her that he is not mad and was merely lost in thought. Hearing his reassurance, Theo clutches her chest and sighs in profound relief. Gripping his face in mild despair, Gray internally groans and wonders if his default expression really looks that intimidating. He reflects on how often people misjudge him since he became Gray, painfully aware of his own frightening and thuggish appearance. Just as he accepts his unfortunate facial features, the door swings open and Asuka returns to invite him inside. Stepping into the dim interior, Gray is guided through the makeshift home by the two children. Approaching a small, tattered bed, he finally lays eyes on their sick family member. Looking down at the frail patient, he promises the anxious children that he will do everything in his power to help her. A slightly older girl steps forward to introduce herself as Ariamel before gesturing to a smaller child named Nina. She continues the polite introductions by pointing out another quiet boy named Lutz. Pointing to the unconscious girl, Ariamel begs Gray to save Stella while he silently inspects her condition. Leaning closer to examine the sick girl, Gray suddenly freezes in absolute shock. He cautiously asks about her eye color, and when a child confirms they are pretty red, a heavy realization settles over him. Peering intently at her parted lips, he clearly spots a pair of sharp fangs. Taking in her unnaturally pale skin and the confirmation of her red eyes, the terrifying truth becomes undeniable. Watching the girl feverishly pant in her sleep, Gray realizes that Stella is actually a vampire. He deduces she is likely a half-blood, a tragic existence heavily discriminated against by both humans and pureblood vampires alike. Glancing at the innocent children, he realizes they must be completely unaware of her vampiric nature, otherwise they never would have risked asking a stranger for help. When asked if Stella will recover, Gray bluntly informs them that she isn't actually sick, but rather severely malnourished. The gloomy kids repeat the word in despair, looking down at their frail companion with profound sadness. Gray silently marvels at her willpower, realizing that despite the agonizing bloodthirst caused by starvation, she hasn't attacked her friends because she likely doesn't understand her own cravings. Relieved that it is an easily solvable issue, he states that she simply needs proper nutrition to recover. Turning his attention to the broader problem, he asks the group what they typically eat on a daily basis. They timidly list their meager diet, explaining they survive on church handouts and the occasional bread bought with flour money. A heavy, depressing gloom immediately falls over the room, prompting Gray to hastily apologize for prying into their struggles. He grimly calculates their situation, realizing that the weekly church handouts are likely the only decent meals these orphans receive. Making a sudden decision, he confidently announces that he will personally provide all their food for the next month. The entire room freezes, staring at the intimidating adventurer in total, dumbfounded shock. Theo and Asuka stare in shock as Gray insists on taking care of their sick friend, brushing off their protests that it is too much to ask. Gray bluntly explains that his magic cannot cure malnutrition, insisting that a daily balanced diet is the only real solution to her illness. Overcome with immense gratitude, the children tearfully thank him for his unexpected kindness. Leaving them to rest, Gray turns away and declares he is heading to the market to gather necessary supplies. Walking through the streets, he admits to himself that abandoning these kids now would leave him with crushing regrets. A sinister grin stretches across his intimidating face as he mockingly thinks the kids have run out of luck by falling victim to his self-satisfaction. Planning a gentle meal for their weak stomachs, he chuckles darkly while deciding to make bread gruel with fresh fruit. Suddenly, Gray halts his march and turns his head as a shady voice calls out to him from behind. Two menacing thugs approach him with sleazy smiles, asking if he also has his eye on the vulnerable orphans in the shack. Bewildered and thoroughly disgusted, Gray glares back at the foul strangers. When one thug aggressively grabs his shoulder, Gray violently swats the filthy hand away. The thugs stagger backward, caught completely off guard by his sudden display of aggression. Gray's intense, murderous glare freezes the criminals right in their tracks. Recovering their nerve, one thug furiously curses at Gray and prepares to fight. Without a moment's hesitation, Gray violently headbutts the thug, vowing to ensure they never think about harming those little ones again. The thug crumples to the ground, groaning in sheer agony while his companion watches in absolute terror. Looming menacingly over the remaining thug, Gray threatens to feed them to wild harpies if they ever lay a hand on the orphans. He leans in close, vividly detailing how harpies slowly chew their prey starting from the toes to keep them alive in agonizing pain. Utterly terrified by the gruesome description, the thug screams in pure horror. After dealing with the trash, Gray mentally complains that his naturally intimidating face is always what scares people the most. Interrogating the beaten thugs about why they bothered him, Gray learns they mistakenly assumed he was a fellow predator hunting the same targets. Infuriated, Gray yells at them for judging people by their appearances, asking sarcastically if they learned anything in elementary school. He quickly catches himself, realizing with a heavy sigh that this fantasy world probably lacks an elementary school system. Resuming his errands, Gray reflects on his home base, the sprawling and vibrant city of Barstoke. He notes that Barstoke is heavily populated and massive in scale because it sits on a major route connecting the capital to another country. The city boasts a massive adventurers guild offering moderate quests, making it an incredibly easy place to live for career adventurers like himself. Purchasing apples at a stall, he acknowledges that the large population naturally attracts thugs and criminals trying to form underground guilds. Ignoring the city's darker side, Gray efficiently buys milk and bread from the bustling marketplace. Picking up cooking utensils, he confidently notes that operating solo allows him to keep all his rewards and easily afford meals for the orphans. He defensively assures himself that he works alone strictly by choice, not because no one wants to team up with him. Returning to the shack with a large haul of supplies, Gray proudly declares that it is time to start cooking. The children stare at him in utter disbelief, shocked that such a terrifying adventurer actually knows his way around a kitchen. Flustered by their reaction, Gray grumbles that he knows he does not look the part while a panicked Theo apologizes for staring. Eager to contribute, the kids immediately offer to start the fire, leaving Gray mildly exasperated but charmed by their energy. The sick girl watches Gray intently from her makeshift bed in the corner of the room. Catching her quiet gaze, Gray offers a gentle smile and reassuringly tells her to hold on just a little bit longer. Encouraged by his warmth, the frail girl gives a weak but deeply hopeful nod. Theo gracefully corrals the younger children, Lutz and Nina, instructing them to wait patiently with her while Gray prepares the food. Observing their polite obedience, Gray marvels at how well-behaved they all are despite growing up in the harsh slums. Keeping his thoughts to himself, he decides not to pry into their painful past, focusing entirely on cooking them a hearty meal. Skillfully peeling the vegetables, Gray begins preparing a hearty meal for the orphans. He watches the children work together, noting that they can easily manage the simpler recipes. He pauses his careful chopping, suddenly distracted by a small movement nearby. He finds a tiny toddler silently staring up at him with wide, curious eyes. Gently wiping her face, he tells her to wait over there because the food will be ready soon. Despite the intense staring, he feels relieved that she doesn't seem scared of his intimidating face. His heart skips a beat when the little girl unexpectedly calls him Dada. He hesitates to correct her, silently worrying that denying it might make her sad. An older kid quickly intervenes, scolding little Nina to stop bothering Gray. Standing awkwardly in the kitchen, Gray wonders how he should handle the delicate situation. Putting the awkwardness aside, he cheerfully announces that the food is finally ready for everyone. Sitting down at the rustic table, he winds up sharing the warm meal with the orphans. The children's eyes light up with pure joy as they exclaim how delicious the food tastes. An older sibling playfully scolds Asuka, telling the energetic boy not to talk with a mouthful of food. Gray silently watches the lively dinner table, absorbing the warm atmosphere of the chaotic family meal. Leaning across the table, he gently wipes the messy faces of both Nina and little Lutz. Nina beams up at him, adorably thanking her Dada for the delicious food. The older siblings smile warmly at the toddlers, asking if they really like the meal that much. Gently approaching the bedridden Stella, they coax the sick girl into trying to eat. Stella stirs weakly, her eyes fluttering open as she notices the warm bowl of food. Offering the meal gently, Gray softly tells the ailing girl to take her time. He breathes a quiet sigh of relief, noting that Stella still has enough energy to chew. Insisting that he relax, the grateful older children demand that he leave the cleanup to them. He bashfully accepts their enthusiastic thanks, telling them there is no need to be so formal. Watching them work together, he hopes that time will slowly fix the remaining awkwardness. With the chores finished, Gray stretches and announces that it is time for him to head home. Before he can leave, little Nina wriggles over and stops him with a heartbreaking plea for her Dada. She tightly clutches a tattered, worn-out doll in her small hands. Noticing the ragged toy, the older sibling apologizes for Nina's sudden clinginess. Trying to gently pull the toddler away, the older child explains that Gray needs to return to his own home. Yielding to Nina's desperate grip, Gray decides to stay just a little longer until the kids fall asleep. He silently reflects that he is only helping because he wants to live a life free of regrets. Suddenly, his mind is hijacked by a traumatic memory of a younger sibling happily saying goodbye. The dark flashback continues with a parental voice reminding him to lock the doors tight while they are away. The phantom memory echoes with reassurances that he is old enough to stay home alone. The memory abruptly ends on those tragic final words, heavily implying a past loss that haunts him. Shaking off the dark thoughts, Gray checks his supplies to ensure the remaining ingredients are perfectly fresh. He mentally maps out a diet of easily digestible meals, planning to introduce quality meat once they recover. Startled from his planning, he turns as the children approach him to offer one final expression of deep gratitude. He is left completely speechless when they hand him a precious notebook filled with hand-drawn recipes and menu ideas. Handing over the reference materials, Gray reminds the orphans to use them wisely since he won't be able to visit every single day. Chuckling internally at feeling like a father heading out on a business trip, Gray listens as the child invites him to check in on the 3 sleeping youngsters. Stepping softly toward the bedroom, he gazes warmly at the little orphans huddled together in peaceful slumber. Watching their gentle breathing, he finds quiet solace knowing they are finally safe and resting without pain. Asking if the older child managed to sleep well after Nina's tantrum, Gray receives a bright reassurance that everything was perfectly fine. Breathing a deep sigh of relief when Gray promises he will return, the child bids him a warm and hopeful farewell. Flashing a determined smirk as he sets off on his own, Gray resolves that it is time to make serious money with a calculated new plan. Deep in the wilderness, the ground shakes beneath the massive, thudding footsteps of a towering elder orc. Overwhelmed by sheer terror, the monstrous beast flees in desperation, acutely aware that it cannot win this battle. Crashing wildly through the forest undergrowth, the massive brute sprints frantically to put distance between itself and its pursuer. Clinging to its pride, the monster seethes over how humans were always meant to be helpless livestock beneath its feet. Horror grips its mind as it recalls that single human effortlessly decapitating every last one of its underlings. Panting heavily from exhaustion, the terrified creature struggles to catch its breath while pushing forward. Narrowing its eyes in deep confusion, the beast fumes over the pursuer's bizarre and relentless attack pattern. Slicing through the air in a sudden blur of motion, Gray effortlessly materializes right alongside the fleeing monster. Casually asking if their game of tag is finished, Gray thrusts his blade forward while the horrified orc shrieks over why he keeps aiming for its crotch. Whispers ripple through the crowd as bystanders recognize the infamous adventurer, prompting the Blood Axe party leader Ganzuz to casually approach Gray and mock him. Ganzuz aggressively questions if Gray is merely buying materials to submit instead of actually hunting, trying to provoke the stoic adventurer. Gray internally groans at the brute's constant harassment, knowing Ganzuz is just bitter about his previous party invitations being rejected. When Ganzuz gloats about reaching B rank, Gray coldly shatters his ego by reminding the man it took him 3 years longer to achieve the same tier. Gray sarcastically congratulates the furious man for remembering his E-rank roots before casually dismissing him to go handle a lowly goblin quest. Enraged by the insult, Ganzuz orders his men to attack, but a desperate guild staff member physically restrains him to prevent a bloody brawl. Watching the chaotic scuffle, Gray calmly notes that he would have been legally justified to defend himself if the idiot had actually drawn his weapon. Ignoring the commotion, Gray approaches the receptionist Sasha and firmly requests to register for a new extermination quest. Sasha reads the harrowing details, explaining that an elder orc must be killed to ensure the safety of a nearby village. She warns him that the target is located just outside Barstoke and that the financial reward is dreadfully low for such a difficult monster. Sasha gently clarifies that imbalanced quests are common because impoverished villages simply cannot afford to pay higher bounties. The concerned receptionist asks if he plans to temporarily join a party to survive the dangerous hunt, but Gray flatly declines. He decides to tackle the mission alone and finish quickly, calculating that the wagon trip will take a full day and he needs to feed Asuka's group. As he turns to leave the counter, Sasha suddenly calls out his name, causing the intimidating adventurer to pause and look back. Smiling warmly, she assures him that the guild staff ignores the malicious rumors about him and sincerely prays for his safe return. Caught completely off guard by her unexpected kindness, Gray awkwardly thanks her before heading out the door. Striding away from the guild, he silently admits his motives aren't purely heroic, as this specific quest offers highly lucrative hidden benefits. He smugly reflects that an elder orc's reproductive organs are a highly prized aphrodisiac ingredient constantly demanded by wealthy nobles. Thrilled by the impending payday, Gray mentally cheers the unknown beast for providing such a valuable and profitable commodity. He chuckles menacingly to himself in the street, leaving terrified passers-by to wonder what dark thoughts are running through the supposed villain's head. Arriving at the impoverished client village, Gray is warmly welcomed by the eager village head and a trembling girl named Marina. Despite Gray's readiness to hunt immediately, the village head insists he rest for the night, leaving Marina utterly terrified of her secret, impending duty. A flashback reveals the village elders pressuring the beautiful orphan to sleep with the adventurer as physical compensation for their low monetary reward. Burdened by her debt to the villagers who raised her, Marina tearfully realizes she has absolutely no choice but to offer her body. Standing nervously in the dim hallway, the terrified girl hesitates before timidly knocking on the door to Gray's provided room. Gray silently opens the wooden door, staring down at the anxious girl standing in the shadows. When he casually greets her by name, Marina violently flinches and stammers out a fearful, stuttering response. Shaking with pure dread, she awkwardly attempts to offer herself to him for the night to fulfill her assigned village duty. Hearing her pathetic whimpers, Gray groans internally, disgusted that the village resorted to offering a young woman to make up for their lack of funds. He silently notes the irony of judging barbaric adventurers, especially since he remembers hearing that the lecherous Ganzus is actually still a virgin. Refusing to take advantage of the terrified girl, Gray flatly rejects her sacrificial offer and firmly states that it is completely unnecessary. He orders her to go home and inform the villagers that he is simply going to sleep so he can hunt early tomorrow morning. When she hesitates out of fear that he will abandon the mission, Gray gently reassures her that he will absolutely complete the extermination quest. He promises that once the monstrous beast is dead, the villagers will finally be able to safely hunt in the forest and resume their normal lives. Overwhelmed by his unexpected decency, Marina politely excuses herself and quietly pulls the door shut behind her. Walking safely away from his room, she clutches her chest and marvels at the intimidating adventurer's profound and genuine kindness. Returning to the anxious villagers, Marina relays the miraculous news, prompting a collective wave of relief that she was spared and the quest remains active. The next morning, Marina approaches Gray's room carrying a tray of freshly prepared food for the generous adventurer. She cheerfully greets him through the door, apologizing for her behavior the previous night, and Gray politely welcomes her arrival. Handing back the completely empty plates, Gray warmly thanks her for the delicious meal before preparing to slaughter the monster. Accepting their gratitude, Gray nods calmly and tells the villagers they are welcome. The desperate villagers beg Gray to be careful, insisting he is the only one they can rely on for this dangerous task. As he turns to leave, the townspeople call out their final words of encouragement, placing all their hopes entirely on his shoulders. A young boy enthusiastically waves goodbye as the imposing adventurer heads off into the unknown. Snapping back to the present reality, an unseen figure suddenly demands Gray hand over his valuables while frantic rustling echoes nearby. Panicking from the sudden threat, the frightened target desperately scrambles to escape the looming danger. Stomping onto the screaming elder orc, Gray sadistically demands the beast say its final prayers while debating whether to crush its head or its groin first. Looming over his defeated prey, the merciless adventurer cruelly asks the monster which body part it wants to lose first. With a sickening squelch, Gray finishes the kill and mentally notes the extreme convenience of the rare, high-class magic bag he possesses. Remembering he bought the expensive item during his past party days, he feels relieved he does not have to carry the beast's severed head and testicles by hand. Despite the magical convenience, he still grimaces at the sheer disgust of storing a severed head and bloody genitalia inside his inventory. Returning triumphantly to the village, Gray announces that the forest is finally safe again now that the orc is dead. The village elder approaches with heavy footsteps, deeply thanking the adventurer for taking the time to report his success. To definitively prove the beast's demise, Gray nonchalantly pulls the grotesque, severed trophies directly from his magic bag. Shrieking in absolute horror at the gory sight, the terrified villagers aggressively beg Gray to put the disgusting proof away immediately. Calming down slightly, the relieved villagers enthusiastically call out his name in deep appreciation. Declining their warm offer of a prepared meal and a bed for the night, Gray politely explains he needs to hurry back home. Disappointment visibly washes over the villagers as they droop their heads in quiet understanding. Offering their final, heartfelt thanks, the grateful townspeople wave him off and urge him to travel safely. Listening to the satisfying rattle of his hard-earned coin, Gray confidently notes that his savings are growing fast enough to trigger his master plan soon. His imagination runs wild with vivid visions of finally executing his ultimate goal to build his very own dream home. Riding smoothly down the trail, he reflects on his lengthy stay in Barstoke and decides it is finally time to stop living out of inns and settle down. Staring ahead, he morbidly jokes that the defeated elder orc should rejoice, as its severed family jewels will fund his future legacy. The following morning breaks peacefully as Gray finally returns home to his rented room at the Barstoke Inn. Sitting quietly in his room, he carefully inspects a small, worn-out stuffed doll resting in his large hands. Realizing the fabric is too degraded for normal sewing, he deduces that only alchemical restoration can permanently fix the little girl's cherished toy. Stepping out into the hallway, he is immediately greeted by the friendly but boisterous inn-master. The old man obnoxiously pesters Gray about leaving so soon after a job, instantly jumping to the conclusion that he is rushing out to see a woman. Hearing the commotion, the innkeeper's furious daughter, Lena, storms into the room to scold her father for his relentless gossiping. Slamming her hands down in frustration, Lena loudly berates the old man for constantly bothering their paying customers with his annoying assumptions. The inn-master dramatically defends his right to share manly exploits, screaming that it was unfair of Gray to silently summon his daughter's wrath. Using the chaotic family squabble as his perfect escape window, Gray swiftly excuses himself while Lena promises to handle her obnoxious father. Walking away, Gray mentally concludes that the inn's lack of prosperity is entirely the old man's fault, considering the rooms, food, and Lena's service are otherwise flawless. Arriving at a cluttered alchemist's workshop, Gray calls out for his associate and is swiftly greeted by Lux. Presenting the torn doll, Gray asks for a repair, immediately earning a barrage of mockery from Lux about how uncharacteristic the toy looks in his massive hands. Brushing off the annoying insults, the stoic adventurer bluntly demands to know the price for the magical restoration. Lux slyly hints at needing a specific component for payment, prompting Gray to violently rip the elder orc's head out of his bag, sending the alchemist into a shrieking panic. Flashing back to the unseen voice in the forest, Gray perfectly mirrors the extortionist's menacing glare, aggressively demanding Lux cough up what he wants. Shocked by the alchemist's sharp intuition, Gray wonders how Lux knew he had the highly valuable orc jewels, ultimately forced to hand one over as payment. Despite losing a precious jewel, Gray easily forgives Lux, knowing the eccentric alchemist will happily throw in failed but highly expensive cure potions for free if kept in good spirits. Reflecting on his actions, Gray silently decides that he doesn't mind the inconvenience as long as it makes the kid happy. Back at the rickety shack in the slums, little Nina wails loudly while crying out for her daddy. An older child laughs awkwardly and apologizes to Gray, explaining that Nina has been crying for him the entire time he was gone. Gently comforting the weeping toddler, Gray reassures her that everything is okay now. Still upset, Nina continues to sniffle and rub her teary eyes. Stella playfully reminds her daddy to pat Nina nicely, making Gray incredibly glad to see the sick girl doing so well. Realizing his mistake, Gray warmly apologizes to Nina for keeping her waiting. The children cheer joyfully as Anastasia is praised for looking so pretty now. The older child struggles to find the words to thank Gray for everything, but he modestly brushes it off as no big deal. Changing the subject to lighten the mood, Gray asks the kids if they should make something to eat, which they eagerly accept. An older child asks if Nina should go wait with Theo, but Gray insists she is perfectly fine staying right where she is. Relenting to his request, the older sibling agrees to leave the clinging toddler in his care. Gray smiles confidently as he skillfully prepares the meal for the hungry orphans. The children wait in silent, eager anticipation as the delicious aroma fills the room. During the meal, one of the kids playfully argues about being offered mushrooms without even being asked first. Observing the lively table, Gray silently notes that Isuka looks just like any ordinary boy. He quietly wonders how this normal kid will eventually save the world, resolving to lend the protagonist his strength regardless. Deep down, Gray genuinely hopes to let these children continue living their peaceful lives for as long as possible. Gathering their attention, Gray nervously announces that there is something important he wants to discuss with them. He reveals his plan to buy a house in town and directly asks if they would all like to live there with him. The children gasp collectively, their faces freezing in sheer, stunned disbelief. A heavy, shocked silence instantly fills the small shack as they process his massive offer. Apologizing for their stunned reaction, one child hesitantly asks if he is truly sure about this arrangement. Another kid timidly seeks clarification, asking if he really means everyone, including Nina, Arya, Isuka, and all the rest. Gray firmly confirms that he wants all of them to come, leaving the children completely overwhelmed with emotion. While the older kids stutter in disbelief, little Nina joyfully declares she wants to be with her daddy forever. One of the boys vigorously vows to do his absolute best, leaving Gray confused about what exactly he is promising to do. Gray silently admits he never planned for this outcome, but realizes he simply cannot abandon them after growing attached over the past month. He breathes a sigh of relief that his sudden offer didn't upset them, while the kids insist they are already endlessly grateful for everything. Stella simply nods in agreement and lets out a soft burp, leaving Gray completely baffled by what is going on in her head. Staring up with wide eyes, little Nina adorably asks if her daddy is going somewhere. Reassuring the young girl, Gray announces he is going to find them all a brand new home and tells them to look forward to it. Gently patting Nina's head and praising her as a good girl, he receives an enthusiastic response and a quick thanks from another child. Waving cheerfully, the kids bid him a safe journey and promise to see him later. Looking back at his new makeshift family, the intimidating adventurer quietly says his goodbyes. Striding through the city, Gray calculates he needs a massive party house with individual rooms and a huge living area to comfortably fit everyone. Arriving at the bustling Adventurers Guild, he mutters to himself about preparing dinner and taking a relaxing bath. His peaceful thoughts are shattered when the obnoxious Ganzus intercepts him, mockingly asking if he managed to buy an elder orc's ears yet. Sneering in disbelief, the arrogant thug claims it's impossible to hunt one in just 2 days and dares Gray to pretend he actually succeeded. Visibly annoyed, Gray fires back that the coward should stick to gathering herbs if he is too terrified to accept actual goblin hunting quests. Gray internally notes that the guild system accepts monster ears as proof of a kill, realizing Ganzus only wants them to fraudulently claim a reward. Tossing a heavy, blood-soaked sack directly at the stunned thug, Gray casually remarks that the ears are definitely inside. Panicking at the sudden projectile, Ganzus fumbles wildly to catch the massive bag before it hits the floor. Gray coldly explains he brought the entire severed head to prevent any disputes, warning the trembling man not to drop it. Leaning in with a terrifying glare, Gray taunts the frightened cherry boy to take a good look since he has clearly never defeated an elder orc himself. The intense standoff is abruptly broken when Sasha the receptionist politely calls Gray over to report his quest completion. Immediately dropping his menacing aura, Gray calmly agrees and steps up to the reception counter. Displaying a strained smile, Sasha firmly reminds him that slamming a severed monster head onto the desk constitutes workplace harassment. Brushing off the scolding, Gray smoothly counters that he exclusively visits her line to prevent the newer receptionists from fainting on sight. Oblivious to her exasperated sigh, he internally praises Sasha as one of the rare staff members completely unfazed by his thuggish appearance. Handing over a heavy pouch of coins, the unamused receptionist presents him with his official quest reward. Sensing her unusually curt demeanor, Gray awkwardly changes the subject and asks if she can help him with a specific request. Acknowledging that providing guidance is part of her official duties, Sasha invites him to step outside to discuss the matter properly. Before leaving, she sharply commands a lazy co-worker named Melinda to take over her station. Ignoring Melinda's panicked shrieks about the bloody head on the desk, Sasha casually walks out the door with Gray. Strolling through the streets, Sasha expresses genuine surprise that the intimidating adventurer actually requested real estate guidance. Arriving at a grand building, she proudly presents a massive property that perfectly matches his extensive requirements. Looking up at the impressive structure, Sasha reveals that this specific house was formerly used by the renowned Valkyrie party. She explains that the all-female group simply outgrew the space as their numbers swelled, leaving the prime real estate completely vacant. Gray recalls that the beautiful Valkyrie members are local celebrities who constantly receive invitations to noble banquets. Having previously visited the property on business, Gray notes its perfect size and prime location, instantly agreeing to the purchase without a single objection. Startled by his lightning-fast choice, Sasha comments on how quickly he finalized the acquisition of his new home. She points out the incredibly cheap price, revealing that the ladies of Valkyrie officially offered to cover half the cost specifically for him. Thanking Sasha for escorting him back, Gray walks away while leaving her to deal with the lingering chaos back at the guild hall. Walking alone through the quiet alleys, he smugly reflects on securing such a fantastic real estate deal. Suddenly halting his steps, Gray acutely senses 2 presences on the rooftops, 2 in the shadows ahead, and 1 creeping up behind him. Recognizing their horribly masked bloodlust, he realizes this clumsy ambush is a coordinated attempt to take his life. A menacing figure steps out from the darkness, demanding to know if he is the target known as Gray. Swiftly unleashing a brutal flurry of bone-crushing strikes, Gray effortlessly dismantles the thugs while noting they bear the same rapacious spider's tattoo as his previous attackers. Standing over the screaming, broken bodies, he glares at the final remaining assassin who steps forward to claim his life. Observing his target from the shadows, Gray confidently notes that the man's movements are incredibly easy to read. Materializing behind the panicked thug, Gray violently grabs him by the face and demands immediate answers. He coldly issues a grim ultimatum, promising a painful death if they are the rapacious spiders and a normal death if they are not. Annoyed by the terrified thug's confusion, the adventurer sighs that he is in a hurry to make dinner for his kids. Slitting the man's throat without hesitation, Gray casually reveals he already used binding magic to restrain the rooftop snipers. Meanwhile, at a shabby hut in the slums, another group of cowardly thugs plots to attack the children while the dangerous adventurer is away. Suddenly choking on his own breath, a thug is hoisted into the air as Gray arrives to punish them for ignoring his warnings. The remaining intruders instantly panic and attempt a frantic retreat from the terrifying monster standing in their doorway. Blocking their escape, Gray demands the location of their hideout in exchange for a quick and painless death. Returning to the safety of the hut, Gray is immediately greeted by an excited Nina and a relieved Theo. Dropping his murderous aura completely, the large man softens his posture and gently announces that he is home. Collapsing onto the floor with a heavy sigh, he mentally resolves to annihilate the rapacious spiders after the children go to sleep. His dark thoughts are suddenly interrupted as little Nina approaches him with a curious stare. Reaching her tiny arms upward, the toddler happily demands to be picked up by her new caretaker. When Nina adorably tilts her head and repeats her request, the flustered adventurer clears his throat to hide his sudden embarrassment. Ignoring Arya's polite offer to help with chores, the massive warrior happily scoops a squealing Nina into his arms. Theo playfully pouts about it being unfair, prompting the other children to crowd around their new father figure. A determined Lutz aggressively tugs on Gray's heavy cloak to demand his own turn for a hug. Consoling the eager boy with a gentle pat on the head, Gray instructs Lutz to wait his turn while the child nods enthusiastically. Gathering everyone's attention, the proud protector joyfully announces that he bought them a new house and they will move in 2 days. Overjoyed by the miraculous news, the children beam with absolute happiness and cheer in perfect unison. Later that night, the exhausted children are shown sleeping peacefully together under warm, shared blankets. Slipping quietly toward the exit, Gray prepares to head out into the darkness and finish his bloody work. He is abruptly stopped by a sleepy Stella, who sits up and asks if Daddy is going out to work. Gently apologizing for waking her, he tucks the little girl back into bed and whispers that he will only be gone for a bit. Stella firmly reminds him that they live together now and anxiously asks if he promises to return. Staring deeply into his eyes, she warns that everyone in the house will worry if he gets hurt. Deeply moved by her genuine concern, he flashes a reassuring smile and promises to be back very soon. Refusing to let him leave just yet, Stella sleepily demands that he eventually explain why he chose to become their father. Honoring her heartfelt request, he promises to share his true reasons with the entire family as soon as he gets back. Stepping out into the cold night, Gray feels entirely seen by the young girl and fully embraces his newfound purpose. Shifting back into a ruthless killer, he forces his trembling captives to guide him directly to the bandit hideout. Staring up at the dilapidated stone fortress, Gray coldly confirms that this is the target location. The desperate thugs beg hysterically for mercy, promising to live honest lives now that they have served their purpose. Unmoved by their pathetic tears, Gray coldly reminds them that they permanently threw away their chance at mercy when they targeted the kids. Resolving to eliminate all potential threats to his new family's livelihood, he draws his blade and orders the terrified men to turn around. Kicking in the hideout doors, Gray interrupts the confused bandit leader and sarcastically confirms he has found the rapacious spiders. The seasoned criminal glares fiercely at the bold intruder, bracing himself for a sudden and violent confrontation. Before the furious leader can finish demanding how his hideout was discovered, Gray ruthlessly cuts him off with a blindingly fast slash. A heavy thud echoes through the silent room as the bandit leader's severed head hits the floor before he even realizes he is dead. Striking decisively for the head, Gray ensures his enemies die quickly and cannot rise as undead. When a panicked thug demands to know what happened to the exterior guards, Gray coldly reveals he killed them while silently deciding to avoid using magic to evade detection skills. Desperate screams echo through the blood-soaked halls as the remaining thugs beg for mercy before being brutally slaughtered. Alerted thugs shout warnings about the lively intruder, while Gray calmly notes that navigating the massive basement lair to find the boss is taking quite a while. A towering thug arrogantly boasts about being a former B-rank adventurer, only to be instantly obliterated with a sickening crunch. Moving with blinding speed, Gray casually dispatches an assassin while silently critiquing the organization's pitiful teachings that fail to even match Ganzu's. A surviving thug sprints away in sheer terror, only to freeze in absolute shock as Gray materializes directly behind him. Gripping the trembling man, Gray coldly commands the stuttering thug to stop running and immediately reveal the location of his boss's room. Tossing the informant aside with a loud thud, Gray triggers a hidden trap and casually wonders if he should have fed one of the men to a harpy instead. Finally confronting the syndicate boss, Gray listens as the man confirms the lone intruder report and aggressively demands to know his connection to the targeted brats. Staring down the criminal mastermind, Gray ominously and simply declares himself to be their father. The baffled boss laughs off the insane claim, prompting Gray to draw his blade and condemn the man to grovel in the afterlife to everyone he has ever harmed. Shocked by the overwhelming murderous intent, the boss desperately tries to leverage a secret about the brats before Gray ruthlessly silences him forever. The gruesome bloodbath gives way to a bright and peaceful morning as the children cheerfully wake Gray up by demanding breakfast. Groaning softly under the bright morning sun, Gray receives gentle pats from the adorable toddlers who playfully tease his sleepy state. While an older sibling frantically scolds the poking toddlers to let him rest, Gray sighs in defeat and decides to finally drag himself out of bed. Later at the local inn, gossiping patrons discuss the rapacious spiders, a notorious fighter group that frequently overpowered even the town's elite guards. The bustling tavern mood turns grim as the townspeople whisper in hushed tones that the entire formidable syndicate was completely wiped out in a single night. The patrons share the horrifying rumor that every single member inside the heavily guarded hideout, including the fearsome boss, was brutally decapitated. Listening quietly to the rumors, an older orphan casually remarks to Gray that the mysterious massacre was the only thing anyone talked about at the market. Gray hums in agreement as an older orphan speculates that rival gangs are far too paralyzed by fear of the mysterious killer to try seizing power. Snapping back to their private conversation, the older girl nervously covers up the morbid talk by claiming she was simply expressing deep gratitude for his ongoing care. Another child chimes in with genuine affection, admitting that they can no longer even imagine a life where Gray leaves them behind. Gray chuckles warmly at the memory of how terrified Lena used to be of his intimidating face, though she bashfully apologizes and claims she was too little to remember. The friendly tavern keeper beams warmly across the counter, telling Gray to always come to them if he ever needs absolutely anything. Feeling a strange but pleasant sense of belonging in the community, Gray offers a soft smile and simply agrees. The very next day, Gray shifts gears and happily rounds up the energetic children for a massive family trip to buy new clothes. Deciding they need to scrub up before trying on new outfits, Gray guides the wildly cheering children straight toward the local public bathhouse. Entering the bustling and steamy establishment, Gray approaches the attendant to politely request separate private rooms for the boys and the girls. Little Nina violently spits out her drink in complete shock, desperately tugging at Gray while asking if her daddy will bathe with them. The older girls gracefully accept the separation, waving goodbye to Gray and the boys as they head toward their designated private room. A tearful Nina stubbornly resists the separation, forcing the older girls to gently coax the whimpering toddler away by reminding her it is only for a little while. Breathing a heavy sigh of relief, an older girl brilliantly bribes Nina by promising that Gray will definitely reward her good behavior with plenty of hugs later. Inside the steamy private men's bath, Gray cheerfully instructs little Lutz to sit down on the stool so he can thoroughly scrub his hair. Gently pouring a bucket of warm water over the boy's head, Gray begins the careful and incredibly soothing washing process. Scrubbing the giggling boy's soapy hair, Gray feels a profound surge of warmth, silently admitting he has always desperately wanted to experience parent-child bonding. Turning his full attention toward the slightly older boy, Gray enthusiastically offers to wash Isuka's hair next. A deeply flustered Isuka frantically waves his hands in sheer denial, stammering that he is perfectly fine because having another man wash him is far too embarrassing. Completely ignoring the boy's frantic protests, Gray aggressively scrubs Isuka's soapy head while the embarrassed kid miserably resigns himself to the overpowering affection. Rushing into the lobby, the girls apologize for taking so long, but a smiling Gray reassures them it is perfectly fine while holding a fast-asleep Lutz in his arms. Greeting the nervous clerk at the clothing shop, Gray casually instructs her to pick out whatever outfits best suit the children. An older child timidly asks if Gray will help choose the outfits, but he awkwardly confesses that he possesses absolutely zero fashion sense. Little Nina gleefully calls out for her daddy, excitedly showing off a frilly new dress that makes her look like a princess. The adorable toddler happily twirls around in her brand new clothes while the others watch in silent admiration. Beaming with genuine joy, the older siblings enthusiastically praise the little girl for looking so incredibly pretty. Standing before a massive estate, Gray announces that this is their new home, leaving the children completely awestruck. Eager to explore the vast house, the boys excitedly call for Nina and Lutz to follow them inside. The energetic kids sprint recklessly toward the staircase, prompting the older siblings to chase after them with frantic warnings. Catching a stumbling toddler just in time, Gray gently urges them to be careful while receiving a sweet, lisped thank you. Gathering the group together, Gray announces that the individual bedrooms on the second floor are available on a first-come, first-served basis. Hesitating politely, an older girl insists that Gray should go ahead and pick first while she waits to take the last remaining room. Gray gently reminds her that they are family now and shouldn't hold back, though he silently accepts it will take time for them to make selfish requests. Exploring their sprawling new living quarters, the toddlers excitedly marvel at how incredibly huge the rooms are. The older girls cheerfully agree that the little ones can share a room with them until they eventually decide they want their own spaces. Having successfully secured food, clothing, and a home for the orphans, Gray silently debates whether sending them to school should be his next priority. He quickly dismisses the local academy as a useless playground for noble brats, mentally vowing to violently intervene if anyone ever bullied his kids. Reflecting on the syndicate boss he executed, Gray resolves to patiently learn the children's hidden circumstances over time rather than forcefully prying into their pasts. His quiet contemplation is abruptly interrupted by a soft knock, and he opens his bedroom door to find 3 of the older children standing hesitantly in the hallway. Looking deeply embarrassed, the kids confess that they are struggling to fall asleep alone because they are so accustomed to sleeping huddled together. Welcoming them inside with a warm smile, Gray kindly offers to spread futons across the floor since the bed isn't quite large enough to fit everyone. Surrounded by the peaceful breathing of the sleeping children, Gray chuckles softly to himself and realizes this cozy arrangement isn't much different from their old shack. Yelling across the room, Theo aggressively shakes Isuka awake and demands he get up because everyone else has started eating breakfast. Sleepily greeting the room, Isuka reflects that it has already been close to a month since they moved into their new home. Observing the morning routine, Gray notes that while Theo is highly sensible, Isuka is definitely not a morning person. Watching the girls eat, he notices that Nina has a massive appetite while Stella stubbornly prefers sweets over regular food. As little Nina adorably tries to feed him, Gray mentally flags the 2 young girls as notoriously picky eaters. Setting his plates down, Gray warmly thanks Ariamel for cooking their meal while she directs him where to place the food. Curious about her methods, he glances at the paper she is using and asks if it is one of the recipes he provided. Ariamel explains she meticulously copied the recipe because she wanted to preserve the original pictures without altering them. Genuinely impressed, Gray remarks that her ability to read and write is incredibly rare for children in this world. Waving cheerfully, the kids tell their new guardian to come back soon as Gray officially heads out for the day. A small bird lands silently on a nearby wooden post, staring intently at Lutz. Pausing his departure, Gray gently tells the quiet boy to say hello to the bird for him as well. Acknowledging that Lutz converses with animals through his eyes rather than speaking, Gray reflects that they are slowly learning about each other. Transitioning to the forest near Barstoke, Gray ruthlessly strikes down a monster while noting his daily routine has completely changed. Swiftly navigating the brush, he acknowledges that he now strictly accepts quick day quests instead of lengthy expeditions. Slicing through a screaming goblin, the determined adventurer resolves to finish the extermination rapidly so he can return home to his family. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Sasha notes his recent restlessness and points out that he has been entirely ignoring the obnoxious thug who usually bothers him. Visibly startled by the sudden mention of his rival, Gray freezes in absolute shock. Handing over his payment, Sasha asks if he seriously hadn't noticed the man relentlessly pestering him every single day. Gray admits his complete ignorance, prompting the terrified receptionist to point out that the angry thug is currently standing right behind him. Ignoring the looming threat completely, Gray decides he would rather go home and read to the kids than waste a single second on a fight. Leaving the guild behind, he strolls peacefully through the bustling city marketplace. Stopping at a local street store, he hands over some coins and gratefully purchases 7 skewers of freshly cooked food. Standing quietly in the busy street, Gray looks down at his warm purchases while getting lost in thought. A solitary crow caws loudly into the evening sky as dusk settles over the sprawling city. Memories flash back to a modern, dark apartment where a solitary voice mutters a quiet goodnight. The vision lingers on the empty, unlit entryway of his previous life's sterile home. He remembers the crushing loneliness of returning to an empty house and announcing his arrival to absolutely no one. A heavy realization settles over him as he recalls that his original family was already long gone by then. Reflecting on his past trauma, he admits that greeting an empty room was a meaningless ritual he simply couldn't abandon. Snapping back to the present reality, Gray arrives at his new front yard and happily announces his return to Nina and Lutz. Hearing his voice, the two young children excitedly patter across the grass to welcome him back. The front door creaks open as Theo smiles brightly, greeting him warmly while ushering everyone inside. Moving briskly, Ariamel orders the kids to wash their hands and offers Gray a choice between dinner or a bath. Gray surprises the diligent girl by handing over a secret stash of sweets for everyone to share later. Acting remarkably like a strict mother, Ariamel gently scolds him for indulging them daily, noting that Stella has started skipping real meals. Realizing that Ariamel has fully embraced a maternal role rather than just being an older sister, a chastised Gray quickly agrees to stop. With the scolding finished, the entire found family gathers joyfully around the large table to eat their dinner. Sharing a serious glance across the table, Isuka and Theo silently agree that it is time to tell Gray their secret. Isuka cautiously calls out his name, prompting Gray to pause his meal and ask the boy what is on his mind. Surprising their caretaker, Isuka and Theo eagerly ask to be taught swordsmanship and magic so they can become adventurers. Ariamel immediately objects, insisting that simply being a family is enough joy for her, but the children firmly counter that they want to be helpful too. Stepping into the conversation, Gray admits he isn't opposed to their dream if it's truly what they want, though he suggests setting the topic aside for now. Watching her reaction, Gray silently deduces that Ariamel's fierce objection stems entirely from her deep concern for the children's safety. He reflects that adventuring is an unpredictable job, making it absolutely vital to teach them survival skills just in case anything happens to him. Though he has absolutely no plans of dying, Gray silently vows to never let these children feel the agonizing pain of losing their family a second time. Suddenly, little Stella sleepily mumbles about causing a transformation, prompting a startled Gray to apologize and wonder if he woke her up. Fortunately, the little girl simply rolls over and continues snoring softly in peaceful slumber. The next morning arrives brightly as the grateful children politely thank Ariamel for a delicious meal. Sitting at the table, Gray practically feels the heavy weight of Ariamel's intense gaze fixed on him. Snapping out of her daze, Ariamel excitedly interrupts to present Gray with a specially prepared lunchbox for his workday. Admitting she noticed him frequently skipping meals, she nervously offers the food, which a deeply moved Gray gratefully accepts. Staring down at the precious gift, Gray morbidly muses that he would gladly decapitate anyone foolish enough to reject such a wonderful gesture. Breaking the wholesome moment, Ariamel hesitates and nervously brings up her lingering concerns regarding Isuka and Theo. Validating her deep worry, Gray gently encourages her to communicate with the kids while promising to support their dreams no matter what path they choose. Deeply comforted by his reassurance, Ariamel warmly sees him off and begs him to return home safely. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild, Gray immediately notices an unusually noisy and chaotic atmosphere filling the grand hall. Approaching the front desk, he casually asks Sasha if there is a special event causing all the massive commotion today. Sasha points out the posted flyers, explaining that the legendary all-female party Valkyrie is returning today after conquering the previously unbeatable garden dungeon. Hearing the fanatical news, Gray simply lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh at the overwhelming crowd of excited adventurers. Refusing to deal with his intimidating aura today, Sasha firmly orders Gray to line up for a different receptionist. She sternly adds that Melinda begged her in tears, explicitly demanding that Gray stop turning in severed monster heads as proof of a kill. Ignoring the chaotic chatter, Gray reflects that he hasn't raided a dungeon in years because the worthwhile ones are packed with troublesome monsters completely unsuited for solo players. Deciding to just hunt nearby goblins again, he mentally notes the terrifyingly small chance of a monster being born with a hidden special ability. He reasons that even a goblin blessed with complete magic immunity would still easily die from a heavy physical strike or a steep fall. He further deduces that a monster's immense hidden power is completely useless if the beast is too feral and stupid to properly utilize it in combat. However, Gray grimly acknowledges the terrifying reality that a highly intelligent monster wielding a unique ability quickly becomes a lethal problem. Slashing through his current prey, he vividly recalls a remarkably fast goblin he slaughtered yesterday, realizing it might have actually possessed one of those rare traits. He deeply ponders if these strange monster mutations are functionally identical to the innate skills and gifts naturally bestowed upon human beings. Figuring a divine creator wouldn't discriminate between humans and monsters, he darkly chuckles that the church would throw a massive fit over such a blasphemous theory. Finishing his packed meal in the peaceful wilderness, Gray claps his hands together in absolute culinary satisfaction. Relishing the incredible flavors while sitting on the open grass, he decides he absolutely must take his entire new family on a picnic soon. Realizing Ariamel's immense beauty and domestic skills will inevitably attract a boyfriend, Gray vows to practice serious self-control so he doesn't accidentally decapitate her future suitor. Returning to the bustling guild, an imposing Gray silently steps forward as the next adventurer in line. He bluntly reports his quest completion to a trembling receptionist, instantly noticing her blatant and overwhelming distaste for his terrifying presence. The terrified girl cries out in absolute relief, violently thanking the heavens that he actually brought the designated monster parts this time instead of gruesome severed heads. Handing over his well-earned payment, the receptionist casually answers another adventurer's question about whether the legendary Valkyrie party has descended yet. An excited staff member enthusiastically confirms that the heroes are currently upstairs holding a private meeting with Sasha and the guildmaster. The receptionist teasingly asks if Gray is also waiting to ogle the beautiful women, instantly drawing an annoyed glare from the stoic adventurer. Gray casually explains he only wanted to speak with Sasha about his new house, brushing off the receptionist's frantic suggestion to stick around for the heroes. Leaving the chaotic guild behind, he figures he would only get scolded for interrupting the meeting and decides to head straight home instead. Stepping through the front door, Gray immediately praises Ariamel's phenomenal cooking as the cheerful children warmly welcome him back. Beaming with absolute pride and joy, Ariamel happily promises to pack him another wonderful lunchbox tomorrow. Later that night, a sudden, heavy knocking violently echoes against the sturdy front door of the peaceful home. The aggressive knocking relentlessly continues, signaling a highly unexpected and impatient visitor waiting in the dark. Annoyed by the ridiculously late intrusion, Gray throws open the door and aggressively demands to know what the shadowy visitors want. He freezes in complete shock, instantly recognizing the two imposing, fully armed women on his doorstep as members of the legendary Valkyrie party. In a light-hearted bonus scene, little Nina aggressively taps a shiny button on Gray's new shirt, proudly crafted by Ariamel. The wholesome trend hilariously spreads as all the children joyfully swarm the exhausted adventurer to aggressively play with his fancy new buttons. Confronting Gray on the street, errant adventurers Kasia and Emilia teasingly scold their former teammate for leaving the guild without saying hello. Ariamel politely asks if the women are acquaintances and offers tea, while Emilia points out they are causing a scene outside and demands an invitation indoors. Peering past Gray into the house, the two elite adventurers suddenly freeze in absolute shock at what they see. Sensing the awkward tension radiating from the stunned women, Gray bluntly orders them to come inside already. Stepping across the threshold, the two adventurers silently take in the unexpected sight of the bustling household. Turning to the curious orphans, Gray formally introduces his former party members to his new makeshift family. The children timidly murmur their greetings, slightly intimidated by the towering presence of the famous adventurers. Moving with practiced grace, Ariamel serves the guests fresh tea, earning bewildered thanks from the stunned warriors. Clinging desperately to Gray's legs, Nina and Stella whimper in fear, prompting Kasia to realize the girls are terrified he will be taken away. Stepping in like a responsible older sibling, Theo gently leads the frightened girls away so the adults can discuss important matters. When Kasia finally asks who the children are, Gray casually drops the bombshell that they are his kids, leaving Emilia utterly baffled. Emilia completely freezes in place, her mind short-circuiting at the impossible revelation. Snapping out of her stupor, the Valkyrie leader leans in aggressively and demands to know who the mother is. As Nina adorably rubs her face into his leg and calls him daddy, Gray sighs about the snot on his shirt while Kasia tells Emilia to stop scaring them. Kasia logically points out that Ariamel is 13 years old, meaning the math makes it impossible for them to be Gray's biological children. Teasing her flustered leader, Kasia notes that if Gray was the father, he would have had them back when he was dating a very specific someone in their party. Blushing violently, Emilia frantically shouts at her teammate to shut up before she can finish the embarrassing sentence. Shifting the mood entirely, Kasia zeroes in on Stella and bluntly asks if the young vampire is a half or quarter blood. The room falls dead silent as the terrified girl realizes her deepest secret has been instantly exposed. Placing a reassuring hand on her head, Gray promises Stella that his former teammates will never pick on her. Comforted by his gentle promise, the young vampire quietly agrees and relaxes her tense shoulders. Heaving a heavy sigh of resignation, Gray decides to explain the entire crazy story from their first meeting to moving in together. Listening to the heartwarming tale, Kasia smiles fondly and remarks that Gray has never hesitated to help the weak and distressed. She playfully adds that despite his thuggish looks and terrible attitude, his soft-hearted nature has never changed. Changing the subject, Gray asks how they knew to find him here, prompting Emilia to reveal they promised to cover half the cost of any party house he bought. Expressing genuine gratitude, Gray still questions why they would go out of their way to pay for such an expensive property. Emilia explains that buying a party house usually signals the formation of a new team, which meant she and Sasha needed to investigate his new recruits. She passionately declares that since he always hated joining parties, she wanted to personally ensure he wasn't being deceived by manipulators. Kasha laughs that they came fully prepared to stage an intervention, only to be completely blindsided by a house full of 6 orphans. As Emilia admits her own utter surprise, Gray looks down and notices little Nina rubbing her tired eyes. Reassuring the sleepy toddler that he isn't going anywhere, Gray gently encourages Theo to take the younger kids to bed. Watching Theo expertly guide the little ones away, Gray proudly praises her as an incredibly dependable kid. Observing the quiet domesticity, Emilia softly notes that Ariamel acts much more like a devoted mother than a simple child. Deciding it is getting late, the women prepare to leave, rejecting Gray's offer for an escort by reminding him they are elite warriors. Kasha confidently adds there is nothing to fear since a local criminal organization was completely wiped out and decapitated a month ago. Sweating nervously at the gruesome detail, Gray awkwardly agrees that such an event definitely happened while hiding his own involvement. Ariamel approaches the door to apologize for keeping them so late, but Emilia warmly waves off the young girl's concerns. Smiling brightly, Ariamel formally declares that any friend of Gray's is welcome in their home at any time. Stunned by the word friend, Emilia dazes out for a second before cheerfully thanking them and happily heading out into the night. Watching them leave in confusion, Gray wonders what the sudden visit was about, prompting Ariamel to gently explain that his friends simply care about him. Little Stella excitedly shouts peekaboo, while demanding Gray switch his button. She dramatically completes her game of peekaboo, bursting with adorable energy. The next morning, Theo frantically chases down Gray to hand him his forgotten lunchbox. The entire family gathers at the door, waving goodbye and warmly telling him to take care. Stepping outside, Gray's heavy boots clack against the stone path as he leaves for work. Looking back, he firmly instructs Isuka and Theo not to overdo their training and promises to teach them magic later. He tells them they must learn to read from Ariamel first, hoping the lessons will give the 3 of them a good opportunity to talk. Walking away, Gray reflects that having a family see him off is a priceless luxury, far more valuable than jewels or extravagant meals. Feeling utterly invincible, he dramatically declares that this incredible motivation is father power. Arriving at the guild, Sasha greets him warmly and apologizes for the chaos from the night before. Brushing off her concern, Gray thanks her as a familiar voice suddenly calls out his name. Turning around, he is greeted by Halseria, an A+ rank adventurer and energetic member of Valkyrie. Her party leader, Emilia, quickly interrupts, suggesting they need to get moving. Emilia explains they are heading to see Lord Barstoke, who wants a full report on their dungeon expedition. Gray simply nods, taking in the information about their sudden meeting with the noble. Emilia awkwardly attempts to invite Gray to lunch, playfully referencing the romance of dungeon adventurers. Before she can finish, Halseria cuts her off, warning that Kasha will be furious if they are late. Watching them leave, a curious Sasha asks Gray if he is secretly on good terms with the legendary Valkyrie party. Keeping it vague, Gray merely states they go way back, remembering that Emilia was asking about him yesterday. He silently decides to hide his past with them, knowing Sasha would mercilessly pry for details if he admitted they used to be in the same party. He fondly remembers his old mid-level party, One Blade, which consisted of Emilia, Kasha, himself, the leader, and 2 others. He recalls that as their ranks smoothly increased in another country, so did the bothersome political obligations. Gray deduces that Lord Barstoke likely summoned Valkyrie to form a political connection with future S-rank adventurers. Excited by the idea of dungeon stories, he decides to invite Valkyrie over for dinner so Isuka and Theo can hear their tales, even if Ariamel might have mixed feelings about it. Meanwhile, out in the field, Gray effortlessly annihilates a massive monster with a single, devastating strike. Wiping the beast's blood from his face, he calmly declares that it was a good fight. Suddenly, his stoic expression shatters into sheer panic as he realizes his armor has become noticeably tighter. Pinching his waistline, he grumbles that his sudden weight gain is the direct result of taking easy quests while eating Ariamel's delicious food all day. Despite the terrifying realization of his growing waistline, his only real concern is wondering what Ariamel is making for dinner. Returning to the guild much earlier than usual, Gray is greeted by Emilia, who correctly guesses he took an easy job to get home before dark. Gray bluntly confirms her suspicion, proudly declaring that getting home early is for the sake of his kids and himself. Changing the subject, Gray notes she is back early too and asks if the Lord failed to invite her to dinner. Impressed that she boldly rejected account, Gray listens as Emilia explains the shocking true reason behind the Lord's summons. Emilia reveals that the Lord didn't care about the dungeon. Instead, he wanted to deploy Valkyrie to serve as party members for a newly chosen hero in another country. Gray repeats the information in shock, utterly stunned that a hero has actually been chosen. Emilia furiously deduces they were only selected because the new hero is a man, making an all-women, high-ranking party the perfect political pawns. Enraged by the blatant setup, Emilia loudly complains that they are basically being sent as potential brides, fiercely swearing she will never accept it. Kasia quickly shushes Emilia and apologizes to Gray, begging him to pretend he didn't hear their dangerous political rebellion. Watching them leave, Gray is baffled that Asuka isn't the hero, wishing he knew more about the game's lore as his mind drifts back to dinner. Pushing the heavy political drama aside, Gray arrives home to a chorus of cheering children, happily announcing his return. Stepping through the door, Gray silently breathes a sigh of relief that Asuka is not the destined hero. Welcoming him back, Arya gently nudges the toddlers forward because they have a special surprise to show him. Beaming with pride, the little ones hold up adorable, childish drawings lovingly labeled for their papa and daddy. Overwhelmed by the pure emotional impact, Gray completely loses his balance and collapses backward onto the floor. Stammering wildly, he desperately tries to regain his composure by claiming a hardened B-rank adventurer wouldn't be shaken by simple drawings. Seeing Nina look worried that he dislikes the gift, Gray instantly drops the tough act and declares how incredibly happy he is. Hugging the toddlers tightly, he silently vows to become a wonderful father while resolving to buy magically indestructible frames for the precious artwork. Later that day, the older children gather around a wooden table to watch an intense arm wrestling match between Gray and Asuka. Sweating profusely, Asuka strains with all his might to move Gray's unyielding arm while the others enthusiastically cheer him on. Watching the lively scene from the doorway, Arya smiles warmly, realizing Gray must have given the boys some encouraging words. Tugging on her sister's sleeve, little Nina cheerfully asks Arya what fun games they are going to play today. Giggling softly, Arya playfully taps her chin as she considers the best activity for the energetic toddlers. She enthusiastically announces that they will all help out by vigorously stomping the laundry together. Eager to contribute, Asuka and Theo immediately volunteer to scrub the bath while the younger ones handle the clothes. Before leaving to clean, the older siblings nervously mention they have something important to discuss regarding their sword practice. Nodding understandingly, Arya agrees to hear them out as soon as they finish their daily chores. Splashing happily in the tub, the toddlers stomp the soapy laundry while Arya warns them to be careful not to slip. Suddenly losing his footing, Asuka crashes headfirst into the bathwater, prompting the others to panic and offer immediate first aid. Pulling the coughing boy up, Arya gently warns the toddlers to hold on tight so they do not end up falling like Asuka just did. Shaking out a large white sheet, Arya successfully finishes hanging the freshly washed laundry on the outdoor line. Nina excitedly demands that they tell Daddy how much she helped so she can be showered with well-deserved praise. Observing their exhaustion after the heavy chores, Arya kindly suggests they all take a break and get something to eat. The children happily devour their delicious meal while Arya gently encourages Stella to finish her entire plate. Theo volunteers to do the grocery shopping, and Arya politely asks her to pick up some coffee for Gray as well. Watching the table closely, Arya notices little Lutz sneakily feeding his remaining food to a stray cat. With full bellies, the children begin to yawn and rub their heavy eyes as sleepiness overtakes them. Tugging gently on her sister's clothes, Stella quietly whispers that she needs to use the potty. Arya quickly rounds up all the kids for a bathroom trip, officially announcing that it will be nap time right afterward. Soon, the toddlers are sound asleep, huddled peacefully together under the warm blankets. Turning her attention to Asuka and Theo, Arya quietly asks what they wanted to discuss earlier. Staring with fierce determination, the two older children boldly declare their intense desire to become professional adventurers. Looking deeply worried, Arya tries to steer them towards safer jobs in town, like working at the bustling market or the local guild. Refusing to back down, they vow to study swordplay and magic relentlessly so they can become strong enough to protect people just like Gray does. To achieve this ambitious goal, they earnestly beg Arya to teach them how to read and write. Overwhelmed by their absolute resolve, Arya falls silent as she processes their incredibly mature request. She smiles warmly, realizing that Gray's unwavering kindness has finally given these traumatized orphans the freedom to dream about their futures. Beaming with pride, Arya officially agrees to teach them, earning an enthusiastic chorus of thanks from the aspiring heroes. Their heartwarming conversation is abruptly interrupted when a groggy Lutz wakes up from his nap and wanders over. Arya shows the curious toddler the paper and charcoal sticks, gently asking if he is interested in learning to write. Nina wakes up and asks what Lutz is doing, only to realize he is playfully scribbling all over a drawing of their father. Seizing the opportunity, Arya suggests that all the toddlers should learn to write the words Papa and Daddy to surprise Grey. Gripping the charcoal with fierce concentration, the little ones excitedly prepare to write their special messages. Arya playfully encourages Asuka and Theo to join in, though a blushing Asuka claims it would be far too embarrassing to show Grey his own writing. A hand rests carefully on the hilt of a sheathed sword. Grey silently and carefully withdraws the gleaming blade from its scabbard. Holding the weapon up to the light, he notes that today he only needs to complete one specific task. Looking at a charming drawing of his family, he resolves to go buy some picture frames. Stepping into the kitchen, Grey insists on helping out with breakfast instead of leaving all the work to Ariamel. Smiling warmly at his unexpected offer, she happily agrees to let him take over the cooking for the morning. Grey confidently tosses chopped vegetables in a sizzling pan, expertly preparing the massive morning meal. Surveying the massive feast, he briefly wonders if he made too much before deciding it is perfect for growing children. Bursting into the room in a flurry, a panicked Theo apologizes for oversleeping before freezing in shock at the sight of Grey cooking. Smiling at her perfect timing, Grey smoothly asks the flustered girl to go wake everyone else up. He casually points out her severe bedhead, leaving the embarrassed girl clutching her messy hair. Quickly flattening her wild strands, Theo enthusiastically agrees and darts off to rouse the others. A frenzied clatter erupts from the bedroom as Theo loudly demands Asuka to get out of bed. Stumbling into the kitchen while rubbing their sleepy eyes, the young trio receives warm praise from Grey for getting up on their own. Taking charge of the morning routine, Grey offers to get the youngest kids washed up while Ariamel finishes preparing the table. Rolling up his sleeves, the seasoned adventurer braces himself and charges onward to the chaotic bathroom battlefield. Water splashes violently everywhere as Nina snatches a cup and vigorously gulps down her drink. Returning completely soaked from head to toe, Grey awkwardly laughs it off while Ariamel giggles and apologizes for the handful. Remembering his modified schedule, Grey casually mentions that Ariamel does not need to pack him a lunch today. He drops the exciting news that he is ignoring his quest today and taking everyone out to eat instead. The children instantly erupt into joyous cheers, thrilled that their hardworking papa is finally taking a day off. Little Stella timidly raises her hand, anxiously asking if she is allowed to join the fun too. Gently patting her head, Grey warmly reassures her that of course she can come because it is a family outing. He internally sympathizes with Stella's deep fears, knowing she constantly worries that her vampiric traits draw strange looks from the public. To put her mind at complete ease, Grey fiercely promises to permanently take care of anyone who gives them trouble. Relieved by his deadly reassurance, Stella nods happily as Ariamel eagerly claps her hands to get everyone ready. Strolling through the bustling city streets, Grey recalls a recent conversation he had with Halseria. His peaceful thoughts are violently interrupted when an armored city guardsman angrily calls out to him from the street. The aggressive guard claims they received a report about someone highly suspicious looking like they would sell an elf. Realizing his thuggish face is the real reason people stare at their family, Grey grimly tells Stella not to worry about the commotion. Frustrated that his terrifying appearance attracts more prejudice than a mixed-blood vampire, Grey listens as the guard demands to know whose children he is holding. Glaring down at the hostile officer, Grey firmly and proudly declares that he is their parent. The guard angrily accuses him of lying, arguing that the children look absolutely nothing alike and clearly are not related by blood. Scoffing at the supposed kidnapping, the guard points directly at the purple-haired girl in the group. Stepping forward with an utterly menacing glare, Grey dangerously dares the guardsman to finish his sentence about his daughter. Deeply intimidated but clinging to his authority, the sweating guard nervously insists it is his job to protect the citizens and demands Grey visit the station. Before the tense situation can escalate into violence, a composed Ariamel boldly steps right between Grey and the trembling guard. Staring the officer down with unwavering confidence, the young girl states that everything Grey said is the absolute truth. She firmly declares they are his true family, ruthlessly asking the flustered guard if well-dressed kids suddenly meet his standard for proper citizens. Clutching her little fists and trembling with fear, Nina fiercely yells at the bad man not to bully her daddy. Noting the awkward optics of the situation, Grey mutters that he looks like the bully as he sheepishly apologizes to the children. Taking charge, a confident Asuka urges Grey to leave the scene with them. Theo bitterly points out that people completely ignored them back when they wore tattered clothes. A flustered Gray apologizes for losing his temper, freezing in surprise as the children warmly thank him for stepping in. Realizing the sheer irony, Gray acknowledges that the supposed protector ended up being the one protected by the kids. Reflecting on his newfound life, Gray firmly concludes that helping these children was the absolute best decision he ever made. Suddenly, the inn master spots the towering adventurer and lets out a confused grunt. The old man screams in absolute shock, prompting an annoyed Gray to ask if he is completely overreacting. Stuttering nervously, the inn master frantically insists that anyone would find this bizarre familial development completely surprising. Refusing to entertain the drama, Gray stoically declares there is absolutely nothing strange about his new family. Scratching his head, the inn master asks if the orphans are the reason Gray bought a house, though Gray admits it wasn't the sole factor. Gray explains he simply felt it was time to set down roots, calling the timing perfect for both himself and the children. The inn master chuckles and mocks Gray for doing something so wholesome that doesn't suit his terrifying face, earning a sharp glare. Brushing off the tension, the old man loudly orders Lena to start cooking and invites everyone to grab a seat. The children eagerly devour their meals, shouting with pure delight about how incredibly delicious the food tastes. Lena cheerfully agrees to teach Ariamel the recipe, expressing pleasant surprise that the young woman knows how to write. The inn master proudly explains that sharing a meal with family naturally makes the food taste vastly better than eating alone. Taking a satisfying bite of his own meal, Gray silently acknowledges the absolute truth in the old man's wisdom. Promising to generously offer parenting advice, the inn master brags about his seniority while Gray sarcastically notes his big talk. A few days later, the grateful children warmly wave goodbye to Gray as he heads out for his daily quests. Arriving at the guild, Sasha notices his unusually high spirits and curiously asks if something good happened to him. Meanwhile, Ariamel excitedly tells a nearby child that she is going shopping with Lena today. Watching from a distance, Gray notes with deep satisfaction that the two young women have already become fast friends. Later that evening, an exhausted Gray walks through town eagerly wondering what Ariamel is cooking for dinner. He is suddenly intercepted by the inn master, who asks if the adventurer is heading home early for the day. The old man casually points out that Lena and Ariamel are getting along beautifully and are currently shopping nearby. Meanwhile, two shady men corner Ariamel in the street, aggressively demanding she join them for tea. Looming menacingly behind the terrified thugs, Gray darkly insists they stay for a long chat, leaving them no choice in the matter. Gray calmly orders Lena to head back to the inn, simultaneously instructing a stunned Ariamel to safely head home. Cracking his knuckles, the furious inn master violently agrees that they are going to have a very good talk with the two harassers. Thoroughly beaten into submission, the weeping thugs frantically beg to keep their organs while promising to never repeat their mistake. The bruised men prostrate themselves on the cobblestone, wailing out pathetic and desperate apologies to the two towering men. Rejoining a waiting Ariamel outside, Gray assures her she shouldn't apologize because helping family is completely natural to him. Seeing her silently hesitate, Gray gently calls out her name to comfort her troubled mind. Staring deeply into his eyes, she softly acknowledges his warm and reassuring presence. Breaking the quiet tension, Gray warmly admits that seeing her have fun with Lena makes him incredibly glad he introduced them. Blushing fiercely, a flustered Ariamel struggles to find the right words to express her overwhelming emotions. Gray encourages her to stop holding back, insisting that seeing her happy and letting him spoil her is his absolute greatest joy. Suddenly, a tiny voice interrupts the heartfelt moment as little Nina happily demands to know what they are talking about. Scooping the child up with a bright smile, Gray proudly declares that he loves spoiling Nina, fully embracing his role as a loving father. Cheerful and affectionate, Gray happily agrees to spoil the kids as he scoops one up into a warm hug. Seeing the affection, another child gleefully rushes forward to demand a hug from their papa too. Gray is instantly overwhelmed by a massive group hug that play tackles him, while the older siblings frantically try to intervene. Stepping forward hesitantly, an older girl nervously asks Gray if it would be okay for her to get a hug as well. Yielding to her sweet request, Gray warmly wraps his arms around her in a tender embrace. On another day, the kids excitedly report that nobody harasses them anymore because a terrifying rumor claims two nefarious men will kidnap anyone who bothers them. Swinging his wooden sword with all his might, Isuka unleashes a fierce battle cry during combat practice. Gray effortlessly sidesteps the wild slash, causing the boy to violently overextend his attack. Tumbling face first into the dirt, Isuka listens as Gray sternly lectures him about keeping his eyes open and focusing on his opponent. Scrambling quickly back to his feet, the determined boy respectfully acknowledges the harsh lesson. A memory flashes back to Arya earnestly begging Gray to teach the boys swordplay because they have worked so hard on their reading and chores. Noting that Arya still seems slightly hesitant about the violence, Gray decides he will train the boys properly for their own sake. Standing before his eager students, Gray severely warns them that magic training will wait until they master reading, refusing to waste time on anyone lacking serious dedication. Ordering an exhausted Asuka to take a break, Gray immediately calls Fio forward to test her skills. The scene abruptly shifts away from the peaceful training ground to the imposing facade of the Church of the Holy Kingdom Storia. Inside the dimly lit halls, a respectful attendant approaches a cloaked figure to announce that preparations for their departure are finally complete. Remaining shrouded in silence for a brief moment, the mysterious figure simply agrees to move forward. The polite attendant asks the figure to wait patiently, promising to send someone to fetch them shortly. Stepping out into a corridor, a knight orders a carriage to be readied before casually asking a colleague how their young charge is faring. Sighing heavily, the second knight complains that babysitting such a perpetually gloomy child is completely ruining his own mood despite the oracle's divine mandate. Changing his tone, the complaining knight admits the boy possesses terrifying potential, having completely surpassed the average knight in mere months despite never holding a blade before. He continues to marvel at the young lad's rapid, monstrous growth, acknowledging that this raw, unprecedented strength is undeniably the real deal. The first knight coldly reminds him that they need the boy to reach Holy Knight status immediately, as rival nations have already heard rumors about the chosen hero. Trying to recall their next objective, the second knight casually mentions they must retrieve the Saintess from the neighboring country of Bast. Glaring sharply, the first knight aggressively reprimands his partner to watch his tongue, fabricating a lie that the Saintess actually hails from their own country. Gritting his teeth in visible annoyance, the scolded knight clicks his tongue and begrudgingly accepts the political cover-up. The first knight cynically remarks how incredibly convenient it is that both the hero and Saintess are orphans, making it infinitely easier to exploit them without inviting future trouble. Marching purposefully down the hall, the knights coldly declare it is time to go welcome the Saintess, Ariamo. Lurking in the shadows, a sinister figure mockingly chuckles at the knight's polite phrasing, gleefully noting that abducting a child Saintess won't even make for a satisfying snack. The ominous clacking of footsteps echoes through the dark corridor as the malicious forces finally set their abduction plot into motion. The title explicitly announces that a B-rank adventurer with an evil look has somehow become a daddy to the protagonist and his childhood friends. Sitting comfortably with the older kids, Gray stares silently at the table while deeply lost in thought. Wondering about his past life's plot, Gray suddenly asks Asuka and Fio what they think about the legendary hero and Saintess. Observing their completely disinterested reactions, Gray realizes the children likely have no idea if they possess a special bloodline or hidden destiny. Turning his gaze toward the ceiling, Gray decides he will simply ask the younger Nap Squad about it later. Watching his brooding expression, Asuka asks Fio if she thinks something happened, but she merely shrugs in confusion. Gray's mind drifts back to yesterday, recalling when Emilia forcefully dragged him toward their party house. Despite his angry demands for an explanation, Emilia ignored his complaints and violently yanked him along by his collar. Apologizing for the rough treatment, Kasia simply asked him to come quietly while they dragged him away from the bustling guild. Entering their private headquarters, Emilia formally welcomed her former teammate inside. Halseria quickly offered him a seat, apologizing for the suddenness while assuring him it was safer to talk away from the crowded guild. Sitting down, Kasia nervously asked if their leader had already informed him about the oracle regarding the legendary hero. She revealed that the hero was currently traveling from the neighboring Holy Kingdom of Storia, but bizarrely chose to avoid the main highways and travel through the dense woods instead. Gray questioned how they could possibly track him, prompting Emilia to explain that elves, as people of the forest, can naturally perceive fairies. Emilia noted that the hero's special existence alerts the fairy folk instantly upon his entry into their territory, though Gray internally groaned at the complete lack of privacy. Nodding in understanding, Gray asked if the hero was traveling alone, but Kasia shook her head and admitted they didn't know his exact numbers. Staring intently at the Valkyrie members, Gray flatly asked why they felt the need to share this highly sensitive information with him. Emilia confessed they deeply distrust the city's lord, reminding him they rejected the hero's party invitation and wanted him prepared just in case. Kasia admitted Emilia practically forced the issue because she insisted Gray be warned, prompting him to warmly reply that he still considered them his comrades. Reflecting on the suspicious detour, Gray resolved to stay home and protect the kids, worrying that the hero's secret arrival might somehow involve Asuka's group. Leaning forward with absolute sincerity, Gray solemnly asked his former teammates to take care of his kids if the worst were to happen to him. Deeply moved by his fatherly devotion, the Valkyrie members fiercely promised to protect the children. Returning to the present, a dark thought momentarily crosses Gray's mind as he casually wonders if a hero would actually die if he were decapitated. Snapping out of his murderous contemplation, Gray realizes Ariamel has been gone too long and decides to check on the younger kids. Quietly cracking open the bedroom door, he peeks inside the darkened room. He smiles warmly as he discovers Ariamel peacefully asleep alongside Nina, Stella, and Lutz. Returning downstairs, he whispers to Isuka and Theo that Ariamel fell asleep and asks them to keep their voices down. The two kids silently nod in agreement, immediately understanding the need to let their exhausted older sister rest. Watching them diligently study their books, Gray proudly notes that the older children have been working incredibly hard lately. Resolving his inner conflict, Gray decides it doesn't matter what the hero wants, vowing to fiercely protect his makeshift family no matter the cost. The quiet peace of the house is suddenly broken by a sharp, unexpected knock at the front door. Theo looks up in surprise, but Gray gently orders her to keep studying while he handles the mysterious visitor. Nodding obediently, Theo returns to her books as the towering adventurer heads for the entrance. Standing behind the heavy wooden door, Gray cautiously asks the unannounced visitor to identify themselves. The door swings open slightly to reveal Emilia standing alone on the front porch. Surprised by her solo visit, Gray asks why she came alone, prompting a defensive HMPH from the embarrassed Valkyrie leader. Recovering her composure, Emilia apologizes and declines his offer to come inside, stating that Kasha ordered her to return immediately. Handing over a small object, she quickly reports that Halseria tracked the hero exiting the forest, meaning he will likely arrive in the city in less than half a day. Presenting a pair of glowing magical stones, Emilia explains they are communication devices that shine brightly when the user concentrates on them. Giving him one of the inexpensive stones, she promises to rush to his side immediately if he ever uses the device in an emergency. Acknowledging her request, Gray assures Emilia that they can count on him while she instructs him to use his own item if trouble arises. Examining the useful tool, he resolves to buy some for Isuka and the others, realizing his long solo career left him ignorant of such items. Returning to his expectant family, Gray confirms that his former party member Emilia simply finished her business and left. He quietly pours drinks from a pitcher while the children whisper excitedly in the background. Handing over the cups, the imposing adventurer gently encourages Asuka and Theo to drink up. Theo bluntly asks if Emilia is his girlfriend, causing Asuka to choke on his drink while a deep blush creeps across Gray's face. Tossing Asuka a towel to clean up, a flustered Gray asks Theo what on earth gave her that idea. The perceptive girl explains that Emilia's eyes looked completely different when gazing at him compared to anyone else. Surrendering to the interrogation, Gray admits Emilia is his ex-girlfriend from their old party days but insists they broke it off long ago. Ignoring Isuka's panicked attempts to stop her prying, Theo aggressively demands to know exactly why they broke up. Gray casually brushes off the intense questioning, explaining there was no particular reason and they simply drifted apart over time. He firmly shuts down Theo's continued pressing, declaring that she is getting absolutely no more details out of him. He silently wonders why people find this gossip so interesting, noting it might make sense for nobles or Emilia's fans but not for kids. Suddenly, the door flies open as a frantic Ariamel bursts in, desperately apologizing and offering to make lunch. Startled by her sudden outburst, Isuka and Theo gently remind her that they already ate lunch together. Staring blankly with wild bedhead, Ariamel realizes she was just dreaming in a daze. Her face erupting in a furious blush, the utterly embarrassed young woman quickly excuses herself to go wash up. Isuka boldly comments on her impressive bedhead, prompting Gray to warn the boy that he absolutely cannot say things like that to a young lady. A confused Isuka simply tilts his head, genuinely wondering if it wouldn't be worse to let her walk around without knowing. Later that evening, Gray approaches a calmer Ariamel and offers to help her prepare dinner. Looking away nervously, she politely declines his assistance, insisting she wants to handle the cooking by herself today. Accepting her wishes, Gray walks away while internally wondering if the sweet girl is suddenly entering a rebellious phase. His thoughts are interrupted as little Nina excitedly tackles his leg, happily cheering for her daddy. Appearing from the doorway, the Master chuckles and teases the towering adventurer about acting like a proper father. An annoyed Gray tells the old man to shut up, mockingly asking if Lena finally kicked him to the curb before the Master reveals he brought leftover soup. Handing over the heavy pot, the Master takes a moment to admire the new house, noting it is his first time visiting. His jovial expression suddenly shifts into something much more serious as he prepares to deliver a warning. The old man urges Gray to be careful, revealing that suspiciously well-mannered men dressed as mercenaries have been asking around the guild for Ariamel. Gray's eyes narrow as he silently processes the threat, offering his sincere gratitude for the vital intelligence. Calling the towering warrior bashful, the Master waves off the thanks, declaring Ariamel is family before happily bidding the children goodbye. Spotting the large pot in his hands, Ariamel approaches and curiously asks Gray what he is holding. Nina gleefully announces that Lena's daddy brought it, while Gray chuckles fondly at the old man's flimsy excuse about leftovers. Gray cheerfully suggests they wash up and eat, prompting a smiling Ariamel to agree and propose they bring a return gift next time. A sudden, heavy knock at the door shatters the peaceful atmosphere, prompting Gray to immediately stop Ariamel from answering it. Turning to the young woman with a deadly serious glare, he strictly orders her to stay completely out of sight. He grimly adds that if he has to leave, he will be out late and firmly instructs them not to wait up for him. Sensing the dangerous shift in his demeanor, a tense Ariamel nods in solemn understanding. Ripping the door open, an irritated Gray glares into the darkness and aggressively demands to know who is visiting so late. Two imposing men introduce themselves as the Night Mist Hawks, claiming a noble hired their mercenary group to find a missing girl named Ariamel. Gray instantly recognizes the blatant lie, logically deducing that a noble would use private guards instead of shady mercenaries if they weren't at war. Gray mentally reviews the strict laws governing adventurers, noting that their guild-issued identification cards demand absolute obedience to international constraints under threat of severe penalties. He deduces that mercenaries operate without such restrictions, meaning these men demanding entry must have strong personal ties to a powerful noble. Yielding to their knocks, he opens the door while silently concluding that their mercenary disguise was a calculated move to avoid his scrutiny. Serving tea with strained politeness, he listens carefully as the suspicious men immediately bring up a girl named Ariamel. Cutting straight to the point, Gray firmly demands to know the exact name of the noble who issued their contract. The men refuse due to contract confidentiality, prompting Gray to dismiss them entirely because anonymous missing person searches are far too suspicious to swallow. He silently scoffs at their vague cover story, firmly deciding he wouldn't hand Ariamel over even if royalty were knocking on his door. A heavy, suffocating silence immediately fills the room as the two opposing forces silently measure each other's resolve. Unleashing a terrifying glare, Gray instantly forces one of the hardened mercenaries to choke on his own breath in sheer intimidation. Openly questioning their mercenary credentials due to their blatant ignorance of the territory, Gray flatly denies their final plea for information. The mercenaries tense up at the blunt rejection, nervously asking what exactly he is implying by questioning their cover. Completely unfazed by their aggression, Gray orders them to leave his property immediately because it is already past his children's bedtime. With a chillingly calm demeanor, he adds that he has absolutely no desire to stain his family's home with fresh blood. Unnerved by the lethal threat, the mercenaries lean in and nervously whisper amongst themselves to formulate a safe retreat. One of the men casts a wary, calculating glance toward their imposing host as they prepare to leave. Realizing they are completely outmatched in a frontal confrontation, the leader grunts in begrudging understanding. Promising to return and speak with him tomorrow, the intruders finally turn and exit the tense household. As the door clicks shut, Gray evaluates his home's formidable magical security, confident they cannot easily breach the reinforced windows despite likely having a lookout posted out back. He quickly deduces their true, grim strategy, predicting they will wait for him to sleep before launching a lethal sneak attack to silence all witnesses except Ariamel. Refusing to sit idly by, Gray grabs his weapon and heads out into the darkness, determined to take the violent initiative instead. Meanwhile, the Night Mist Hawks regroup in the shadowy streets, fully convinced that their target is hiding the girl inside. Sneering in disgust, they insult his intimidating appearance, writing him off as a low-grade, vicious thug rather than a respectable adventurer. They wildly speculate about the orphans living in his house, assuming he gathered the vulnerable children for some sinister purpose. Convinced of his total depravity, the mercenaries agree that his hidden agenda must be something truly dreadful to behold. Plotting to rendezvous with Soma and report to the bishop, they remain completely unaware that Gray is lurking right above them, quietly memorizing their names. A sudden, heavy thud shatters the quiet night, causing a panicked mercenary to whirl around and demand to know who is hiding in the dark. Stepping out from the shadows, Gray violently drags their unconscious lookout across the ground, coldly warning the terrified men not to leave their trash lying around. Standing calmly before the shouting men, Gray casually tells them he can hear perfectly fine before one demands to know what he did to their companion. Gray explains that his friend apprehended the sneaky trash creeping behind his house, requiring incapacitation when the man put up a violent fight. Pointing to the battered body on the ground, Gray offers to return him alive in exchange for some immediate answers. Glaring intensely, he demands to know why they are looking for Ariamel and what they plan to do once they find their bishop. Realizing Gray knows about the bishop, a frantic thug draws his sword and declares they cannot leave him alive. Gray instantly materializes right beside the swordsman, coldly ordering him to die. Before the man can even process the blinding speed, the adventurer launches a devastating counterattack. The massive impact crumples the attacker's body completely, leaving the final thug staring in sheer terror. Without a shred of hesitation, Gray violently dispatches the last man with a brutal, bone-crushing blow. Stepping lightly from the trees, Halseria casually asks if the towering adventurer is finally done. Confirming his swift victory, Gray asks why she bothered checking when she clearly watched the entire one-sided slaughter. Halseria notes his signature mercilessness, to which Gray vows he will never show mercy to anyone threatening his children's peace. When she teasingly calls him a doting parent, Gray sharply tells her to shut up, declaring that those prepared to take from others must be prepared to be taken from. Halseria playfully suggests he hurry up and find a wife, mischievously offering their flustered leader as a prime candidate. Ignoring her matchmaking attempts, Gray deadpans that Emilia would just turn completely red from embarrassment. Shifting back to business, Halseria points out the hero's location outside the city, confirming the local spirit scouting reports. She details the group of 5, noting an excessively fancy robe, pure white armor, and 2 guards dressed exactly like the unconscious thugs on the ground. Admiring her top-notch tracking skills, Gray listens as she casually mentions the heavily armed targets are currently snacking on forest apples. Offering her bow as backup, Halseria chuckles that Emilia would just get mad if she returned to the house to babysit. Gray explains he specifically left Emilia and Kasia to guard the kids because he trusts Emilia's immense strength. He hopes the 2 women can get along, recalling an awkward tension between Emilia and Ariamel during their last chaotic visit. Meanwhile, in a clearing near Barstoke, a frantic knight apologizes to his angry bishop for the complete lack of afternoon reports. The bishop sneers at the lowly adventurer holding the saintess, assuming a poor working man would happily hand her over for a bit of coin. He arrogantly calculates that if the adventurer demands too much out of greed, they can easily deal with him using more lethal methods. Frustrated by the agonizing delay, the bishop complains about the 3 elite knights who were simply dispatched to confirm the girl's presence. Dreaming of a bright future as a powerful vicar, the irritated man plots to silence any witnesses by sneaking in at night if negotiations inevitably fail. Sitting quietly against a nearby tree, the supposed hero mutters silently to himself. He gloomily reflects that Ariamel is about to be forcefully separated from the people she truly cares about. Irritated by the hero's depressing attitude, a massive knight aggressively complains that the boy is entirely too gloomy. The powerhouse introduces himself as Lundy, the 7th seat of the Storia Holy Knights, aggressively demanding to slaughter the targets because he is pissed off from boredom. The bishop internally sweats, refusing to let the powerful but wildly lecherous Lundy anywhere near the pure saintess. The tense atmosphere shatters when a heavy footstep echoes through the clearing, prompting the bishop to angrily demand the intruder's business. Emerging from the rustling brush, Gray menacingly introduces himself as the father of the daughter they have been stalking. The frantic knight spots the 3 beaten bodies, stuttering in absolute horror as Gray nonchalantly dumps them onto the grass. Silencing his panicking subordinate, the bishop coldly states the battered men brought this on themselves for failing an incredibly simple errand. Assuming the violent adventurer has come to negotiate a payout, the arrogant bishop demands to know Gray's true objective. Ignoring Gray's hostile glare, the bishop blatantly asks exactly how much money he wants. Seething with intense, barely contained anger, Gray questions the corrupt man's claim that Ariamel is supposedly a holy saintess. The smug bishop confirms her divine status, firmly stating she is the official saintess chosen by an undisputed oracle. Adding fatal fuel to the fire, the disgusting bishop offhandedly remarks that it isn't actually necessary for the saintess to remain a virgin. The arrogant noble sneers that it doesn't matter if the girl has already been touched, right before Gray interrupts with a murderous command to die. The holy knight swiftly parries the lethal strike with a loud clang, grunting that it was a dangerously close call. Stepping in to defend the noble, the knight declares he will face Gray instead because killing his charge would cause massive political trouble. Furious at the sheer audacity of a lowly adventurer raising a sword against him, the noble frantically orders his knight and the young hero, Ollis, to kill the attacker. Answering the furious command, the young hero immediately draws his weapon with a heavy metallic clank. The white-armored knight violently clashes swords with Grey, roaring at the adventurer to keep his eyes focused on him. The intense impact of the strike sends the holy knight skidding forcefully backward across the stone floor. Glancing at the young boy wielding the sword, Grey realizes this child is the fated hero and notes that he does not fit the legendary image at all. Evaluating his opponents, Grey mentally calculates that the experienced knight in white armor is likely much more skilled than the untested young hero. Facing down both a hero and a holy knight alone, Grey realizes he must handle this deadly 2-on-1 battle because Halsaria will not be back anytime soon. Formulating a quick tactical plan, the veteran adventurer decides his first move must be to put the young hero completely out of commission. Surging forward with blinding speed, Grey aggressively closes the distance to strike the inexperienced boy before he can properly react. Grey ruthlessly whacks the hero backward with a devastating blow, causing the boy to gasp in pain as the knight yells at the adventurer to back off. Recovering from the heavy strike, the stubborn young hero angrily orders his knight not to get involved because he wants to take Grey down all by himself. Lundy violently interrupts the argument, silencing the bishop who yells at him for interfering. Annoyed by the bishop, Lundy boldly declares a holy knight cannot rely on the hero to defeat a mere adventurer. Swinging his massive blade, the lecherous knight demands to have his way with the saintess once he kills the adventurer. His eyes shadowed with pure rage, Grey coldly declares he has heard enough. He brandishes his sword and vows to send the corrupt knight straight to his god. Unfazed by the deadly threat, Lundy charges forward with terrifying speed. The massive knight brings his heavy broadsword crashing down while screaming for Grey to die happy. Grey raises his own weapon, catching the devastating downward strike in a bone-rattling block. The immense force of their clash shatters the ground beneath Grey's feet, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Watching from the trees, Halsaria mutters that Lundy's strength might be a bit more than she anticipated. Inside the dust cloud, Lundy grins menacingly as their crossed blades remain locked in a deadly stalemate. Grey suddenly breaks the intense deadlock, leaping backward to create distance between them. Frustrated and sweating, Lundy curses as he realizes the supposed mere adventurer is incredibly strong. The panicking bishop screams from the sidelines, demanding the knight hurry up and kill the man despite all his big talk. Enraged by the constant nagging, Lundy violently threatens to kill the screaming bishop first if he doesn't shut his mouth. Capitalizing on the distraction, Grey launches a blindingly fast assault that puts the massive knight entirely on the defensive. Parrying a desperate strike, Grey coldly remarks that rapists like him deserve to be castrated. He unleashes a relentless flurry of slashes, forcing the swearing knight to furiously block every deadly blow. Lundy desperately deflects another heavy strike, skidding backward across the dirt as he curses his opponent's bizarre nickname. Panting heavily, Lundy is stunned that Grey overpowered him despite his magical enhancements, but he fiercely roars for the adventurer to die. Pushed to his absolute limit, the furious knight decides he has no choice but to unleash his ultimate special move to guarantee a kill. Gathering his strength, Lundy cruelly promises to violate the saintess rite in front of Grey's fresh corpse. With a dramatic battle cry, the holy knight initiates his secret hidden cloud technique. His grand attack is abruptly interrupted when he suddenly realizes something is horribly wrong. Grey stands completely behind the massive knight, his blade fully swung in a clean, devastating arc. Lundy's severed head flies through the air, his face frozen in a screeching panic as it rolls across the blood-stained grass. The bishop's eyes bulge in sheer, unadulterated terror as his strongest bodyguard's decapitated head comes to a dead stop. A dark, menacing aura radiates from Grey as he stands over the knight's collapsing, headless body. The terrified bishop sweats profusely, his mind racing for any possible escape from his imminent death. A sudden, cheerful flashback shows a panicked little Nina playing hide-and-seek while frantically searching for her missing father. The heartwarming memory reveals Grey gently reassuring the crying toddler, instantly calming her fears by reminding her he is right there. Halsaria drops gracefully from the trees to announce she is finished, while Grey admits he was genuinely stunned by how many openings Lundy's attack had. Turning his terrifying glare back to the trembling bishop, Grey coldly asks if the corrupt man has finished praying. The adventurer steps forward, his face locked in an expression of pure, murderous intent as he asks why the bishop looks so grim. Grey mockingly suggests the bishop should smile, reminding the terrified man that he is finally about to meet his precious god. Begging for his life, the stuttering bishop frantically offers to pay Grey while warning that the church will not stay silent if he is killed. Grey bluntly states he is completely uninterested, prompting the desperate bishop to blindly offer him women instead. Flailing for leverage, the bishop promises Gray a high-ranking position as a holy knight, claiming his skills could easily earn him the second seat. Cutting through the pathetic bribes, Gray acknowledges that a person does need money to survive, giving the bishop a sudden surge of false hope. Leaning in with a terrifying smirk, Gray finds the bishop's assumption hilarious as the sweating man nervously asks how much his life will cost. The noble demands an explanation as Gray casually reveals he has already received payment in the form of 4 lives. Begging desperately for mercy, the noble swears never to touch Gray's family again as a terrifying clank echoes through the air. Mocking the man's fear, Gray points out that according to church teachings, a good person should happily embrace an eternity in paradise unless they harbor a guilty conscience. Sneering at the noble's pathetic pleas, Gray coldly declares he will take their lives as cheap recompense. He firmly resolves never to make the fatal mistake of showing mercy to enemies who will inevitably hunt his loved ones later. 2 lifeless bodies hit the ground with a heavy thud, leaving the surviving noble trembling in sheer terror. As the desperate man wails for his life, Gray cruelly reminds him that God must be tired of waiting and he is praying to the wrong executioner. The inn master suddenly interrupts the execution, calling out to Gray so he can hand over a few items to the dying noble. The noble stares in absolute horror at the bloody objects presented to him. Blood-soaked teleportation stones clink violently as they are callously tossed onto the stone floor. The inn master casually reveals he looted the stones from the slaughtered caretakers and set the noble's horses loose to destroy any chance of escape. Before the noble can fully process his doomed fate, Gray's sword violently shunks through his chest to silence his screams forever. The noble's lifeless corpse tumbles backward and hits the ground with a hollow, pathetic thud. Gray mentally notes that teleportation stones are ridiculously expensive, single-use magic tools with a terrible cost-to-performance ratio. He observes that the persistent bastard was actually trying to activate his hidden stones to flee right before the fatal strike. Glaring down at the bleeding corpse, Gray mutters a final curse at the man to just die already. Turning his attention elsewhere, Gray halts his departure to address another lingering threat. Kicking the defeated hero, Gray orders the kid to quit playing possum because he knows he is fully awake. The beaten boy groans softly and slowly sits up on the cold floor. Gray demands to know the boy's age, and the kid hesitantly guesses that he probably turned 13 this year. Confirming the boy's name is Ollis, Gray commands him to sit still and answer a few quick questions. Ollis explains he was abandoned at an orphanage as a baby, while Gray mentally notes the kid is the exact same age as Ariamel. Shocked by the boy's origins, Gray clarifies that the orphanage was actually located in the Kodal kingdom rather than Holy Storia. Gray recalls that Kodal is a heavily forested nation situated on the complete opposite side of Holy Storia. Puzzled by how a Kodal orphan became Storia's fated hero, Gray listens as Ollis recalls the day heavily armed emissaries suddenly arrived at his home. The emissaries declared him the Oracle's chosen hero, but the young Ollis begged to let his friends join him on the grand journey. The stern men refused to take anyone else to the Holy City, offering instead to look after the remaining orphans in his stead. Revealing their ruthless nature, the emissaries threatened to kidnap Ollis by force and heavily implied that refusing would endanger his friends' lives. A terrified young girl named Mia watched helplessly as the ominous men surrounded her closest friend. The flashback holds a heavy silence as the young boy fully absorbs the crushing reality of the hostage situation. Ollis stares at little Mia, realizing that his immediate compliance is the only thing keeping his orphanage family safe. Knowing the corrupt officials might break their promise but lacking any real choice, the young boy surrendered and agreed to leave. Pleased by his total submission, the emissaries forced him to make one final, unbreakable promise before departing. They ordered him to lie about his Kodal origins and claim Storia as his birthplace, subtly threatening his friends again to ensure his total obedience. Snapping back to the present reality, the beaten boy stares at the ground in overwhelming guilt and shame. Ollis confesses that he came to Barstoke to secure the Oracle's Saintus, fearing Ariamel would suffer the exact same hostage fate as him. Processing the tragic revelation, Gray finally understands the true motive behind the young hero's desperate actions. When Gray asks about his combat skills, Ollis admits that while his training elevated him above an average knight, he stands absolutely no chance against the holy knight Lundy. Glancing over at the unconscious Lundy, Gray notes that he honestly expected a holy knight to look much more uptight. He recalls that Holy Storia's knights operate on a strict strength-based hierarchy, where only the top 5 seats are trusted to wield legendary holy weapons. Yawning heavily, an ally suggests they finally head back while Gray silently admits he would rather send the captured boy home instead of killing him. Hoisting the completely exhausted Ollis onto his back, Gray begins the quiet trek through the dark streets. Carrying the slumbering boy, Gray contemplates the delicate situation and decides he must consult with his own children before allowing a stranger to stay at their house. Crouching over the fallen enemies, Gray begins ruthlessly stripping the corpses of their valuables while his companion mutters that looting the dead is a remarkably low blow. Unfazed by the moral judgment, Gray coolly defends his actions by declaring that corpses do not need money and that the stolen coins are simply an inconvenience fee. Gray justifies the thorough looting by comparing it to subduing bandits, insisting that keeping their gold is a necessary reparation to cover his vast family expenses. His companion quickly concedes the logical point, acknowledging that Gray will definitely need the extra funds to safely transport the kidnapped boy back to his distant hometown. With the grim looting finished, Gray effortlessly hoists the stripped corpses and begins dragging them away. When asked if he plans to sell the bodies, Gray casually reveals he will simply dump them somewhere remote so goblins and wild beasts can cleanly dispose of the evidence. A sudden flash of brilliant magical light engulfs the area as Gray instantly teleports the wrapped corpses far away into the dangerous wilderness. The magical glow quickly fades into the quiet darkness, leaving behind nothing but the peaceful silence of the empty streets. Gray brilliantly deduces that the Kingdom of Storia cannot publicly retaliate for their missing elites because the kidnappers crossed the border illegally without alerting Barstokes authorities. Waving a cheerful goodbye, the party splits up as Gray instructs Halseria to meet Emilia while he personally escorts Olis to the local inn. Arriving at the Warm Tavern, Gray drops a pouch of stolen coins on the counter and pays for a 2-night stay to ensure the boy has a secure place to rest. The burly innkeeper casually directs them to their room, playfully demanding that Gray trade exciting stories of his exploits as thanks for the late-night accommodation. Marching up the creaky wooden stairs, Gray reassures a slightly nervous Olis that the intimidating innkeeper is actually incredibly tight-lipped and completely trustworthy. Dropping the boy off in a cozy room, Gray turns to leave and kindly promises to return first thing in the bright morning. Standing awkwardly in the doorway, Olis softly thanks his terrifying savior for the room and earnestly promises to pay him back someday. Smirking slightly, Gray waves off the honorable debt by casually admitting he just used the dead kidnapper's money to pay the bill anyway. Slipping back into the quiet night, Gray finally returns to his own dark house and clicks the front lock open with a heavy sigh. His peaceful return is instantly shattered when the panicked children frantically report that Stella has been missing for 2 agonizing hours after a game of hide-and-seek. Rushing wildly through the dark estate, Gray and the terrified children scream Stella's name into the shadows until someone suddenly shushes them from the dark. Halseria warmly welcomes Gray back home, casually mentioning that she already updated everyone on what happened. Kasia smiles and notes they fully expected this outcome, playfully teasing Gray that his habit of saving people never changes. Shifting to a more serious tone, Halseria bluntly asks Gray what he actually plans to do with the rescued hero. Gray explains he wants to gather information and address Olis' separation from his friends before consulting the kids about letting the hero stay with them. Nodding in complete understanding, Kasia firmly promises that their party will help out however they can if any new issues arise. Emilia visibly blushes and stammers as Gray sincerely thanks her for going through so much trouble to help his family. Recovering her composure, Emilia quickly changes the subject and urges Gray to come inside for some hot tea and coffee. Before anyone can move, Emilia suddenly freezes in place and awkwardly fumbles over her own words in utter embarrassment. Rolling her eyes at the sudden hesitation, Kasia exasperatedly tells her leader she cannot run away from this emotional hurdle forever. Panicking in the face of her own anxiety, Emilia hilariously declares she is passing for today and flees the scene while Kasia groans in frustration. Apologizing for her leader's cowardly escape, Kasia casually waves goodbye and announces she is dragging Halseria home. Leaving the chaotic women behind, Gray steps quietly into his dimly lit home and gently shuts the heavy front door. Spotting Ariamel fast asleep on the living room sofa, Gray softly murmurs his return and wonders if she stayed up waiting for him. Leaning closer, he notices the young girl whimpering and grimacing in her sleep as if trapped in a terrible nightmare. Gently resting a large hand on her head, Gray silently wishes he had the power to protect her from her own bad dreams. Deep within her troubled mind, a dark and terrifying dream sequence begins to unfold. A younger Ariamel stands completely alone in the oppressive void, shivering violently against the encroaching darkness. Utterly terrified by the pitch-black surroundings, she desperately wonders where she is and why everything feels so freezing cold. Remembering her hungry siblings, she frantically searches the empty darkness for any scraps of food to bring back to Nina and the others. Crushing despair sets in as she realizes she has no idea how to get home, feeling the immense weight of being the oldest sibling. A sudden, haunting realization abruptly shatters her thoughts as she questions the very existence of her home. The nightmare violently shifts, forcing her to watch in horror as her childhood shack burns completely to the ground. Flashes of her parents' tragic deaths blur into the bittersweet memory of meeting Asuka and starting a brand new life. Despite having absolutely no food or money, she warmly recalls the profound happiness of supporting each other to survive. The comforting illusion abruptly shatters, replaced by the devastating reality that everything she loved has been completely destroyed. The nightmare spirals into sheer terror as brutal thugs appear from the shadows and violently snatch her screaming siblings away. Watching helplessly as a thug brutally strikes Lutz, a heavy hand grips her shoulder and cruelly declares her a permanent slave. Stripped of all hope, a chained and broken Ariamel weakly apologizes as heavy iron locks click shut around her wrists. Collapsing to the cold stone floor, she clutches her chest in pure agony as the nightmare inflicts unimaginable physical pain. A booming, authoritative voice suddenly cuts through her suffering to officially declare her the prophesied saintess. The twisted vision shifts to reveal a smug hero standing at her side, casually noting their shared divine destiny. Surrounded by the sickening apologies of corrupt priests, her fragile mind completely shatters into a violent storm of furious repetition. Driven to absolute, cackling insanity, she violently curses the entire world and demands that everyone around her suffer a gruesome death. The horrific vision ends with the devastating revelation that she ended her own tragic life while screaming those final words. Fading back into the freezing void, a weeping Ariamel tragically apologizes to all her lost siblings for completely failing to protect them. Shivering violently in the endless dark, she desperately cries out for anyone to save her from the unbearable, crushing loneliness. A sudden, overwhelming warmth entirely envelops her trembling body, making her wonder if her late parents are finally embracing her. Blinking away the tears, Ariamel finally awakens from the horrific nightmare to find a deeply concerned Grey gently holding her hand. Grey softly asks if she was having a nightmare, to which she gratefully admits the scary details have already completely faded. Apologizing for falling asleep on the cold sofa, Ariamel urgently tells Grey there is something incredibly important she must say to him right now. Heavy thuds echo as Grey firmly demands if the other person has something to say. A soft, hesitant voice calls out his name from the shadows in response. Ariamel warmly welcomes him back home, completely shattering the heavy tension. Grey reflects on his past life, remembering how returning to a painfully empty house full of squeezing memories was unbearably depressing. He realizes those random flashes were actually precious moments he absolutely never wanted to forget, despite the agonizing pain they brought. He fondly recalls the silly, trifling, and incredibly warm moments that made those memories so utterly precious. Remembering his profound loneliness, he admits he kept greeting an empty house just to feel some fleeting semblance of normalcy. A sudden clarity washes over him as he finally understands that all he ever truly wanted in life was a real family. Snapping back to the warm present, Grey softly returns the greeting and steps inside to embrace his new life. Feeling an overwhelming sense of belonging, he vows to keep these commonplace words alive and remain a family with these children forever. Shifting to a much lighter domestic moment, someone gently asks little Nina if she wants to try putting her clothes on all by herself. Agreeing excitedly, the toddler adorably demands her daddy switch to help her put on her socks. The little girl struggles valiantly, grunting as she tries her absolute hardest to pull the stubborn socks onto her tiny feet. Ariamel gently encourages Nina to keep trying a bit more, just as Grey watches proudly from the background. Giving up on her solo attempt, Nina happily demands her daddy put the socks on for her, which Grey immediately and willingly accepts. Shocked by his instant cave-in, Ariamel sharply scolds the towering adventurer for interrupting Nina's crucial learning process. Frantically telling him to wait, Ariamel begs Grey to let the girl learn independence while the doting father agrees to just sit back and watch. Disappointed by the sudden lack of pampering, little Nina lets out a cute pout as she realizes she actually has to finish the job herself. Standing in the hallway, Ariamel quietly asks Grey if everyone is allowed to sleep in his room tonight. Realizing the other kids have already gathered there, Grey quickly agrees to her request. The heavy wooden door creaks loudly as he gently pushes it open. Peeking inside, he finds the children already fast asleep and snoring softly on his bed. Ariamel whispers her thanks as she crawls into the massive pile of sleeping kids. A drowsy Theo mumbles for Grey to just squeeze in wherever there is empty room. Grey silently stares at the adorable but incredibly crowded bed. Acknowledging that he takes up the most space, he considers buying a bigger bed since this one is far too small for 7 people. A brilliant idea suddenly strikes him, realizing the little ones could just use his massive body as their mattress. Later in the dark, a small hand repeatedly tugs on his clothes to wake him up. A sleepy Nina adorably informs her daddy that she needs to use the potty. Moving expeditiously, Gray handles the late-night bathroom crisis without any panic or haste. A quiet tinkle sound echoes through the bathroom as Nina successfully finishes. Praising her good job, Gray scoops the sleepy toddler up as she mumbles to be held. He gently pats her back to soothe her as they head back to the bedroom. The peaceful night is interrupted again when Stella suddenly announces she also needs to pee. Moving silently as a father and swiftly as a daddy, he flawlessly resolves the second bathroom request. Deducing that Lutz is the next inevitable link in the chain, Gray quickly turns his attention to the young boy. Lutz fidgets nervously on the floor as Gray tells him to hang on for just a second. A quiet dripping sound reveals Lutz couldn't hold it, prompting Gray to gently assure the upset boy that he will wipe it up. Tossing the soiled clothes into a basket, Gray repeatedly tells the crying child that the accident is absolutely no big deal. He scoops the boy up and repeatedly whispers that everything is okay to calm his nerves. Gray mentally notes that explaining logic only confuses crying toddlers, making pure reassurance the most effective strategy. Comforted by the gentle words, Lutz finally settles down and falls fast asleep against Gray's chest. Returning to the washroom, Gray groans that he is stuck awake because he needs to clean Lutz's pajamas before the stains set. He swiftly slides the small garments into the soapy water to begin the midnight laundry. Vigorously scrubbing and wringing out the wet fabric, he diligently finishes washing the clothes. Feeling incredibly drowsy, Gray realizes that going to sleep now will only make him easy prey for the children's morning mischief. Birds begin to chirp loudly outside as the sun rises, signaling that morning has already arrived. Nina and the others enthusiastically shake and pinch the exhausted Gray, loudly declaring that it is breakfast time. Having accepted his fate as their morning prey, Gray slurs his words and groggily promises the kids he is finally getting up. Ariamel cheerfully greets him and suggests he wash his face while he offers to take over the morning chores. Splashing cold water on his face, Gray wonders if the destined protagonist and the hero will become companions or enemies when they finally meet. Gathering everyone around the breakfast table, Gray asks them to keep eating while he makes an important announcement. He explains that he wants to look after someone at the house for a while, urging the kids to be nice to Ullis. The children immediately voice their eager approval, offering thumbs-ups and excited cheers for the new person. Gray feels immense relief that they agreed so easily, having intentionally omitted all the dangerous details about the church and holy nights. Watching the eager children clumsily carry the dirty dishes, Gray nervously warns them not to get hurt. Beaming with absolute pride, he warmly thanks the three little ones for being so incredibly helpful. Nina and Lutz excitedly patter over to their dad, proudly announcing they finished their work and did a very good job. Receiving praise for a job well done, a warm feeling washes over the scene. Deeply touched by these newfound perks of fatherhood, Gray basks in the wholesome moment. A heavy door creaks open as someone lets out a long, tired yawn. Stepping into the light, Gray unleashes a terrifyingly intense glare. The nearby onlookers instantly panic, cursing under their breath at the sight of the intimidating adventurer. Strolling through the tense atmosphere, Gray makes his way toward a local establishment. Approaching the counter, he is promptly asked for his order. Tossing down a few coins with a sharp ting, Gray tells the server to give him whatever is recommended for that price. The server quickly snatches the payment from the wooden counter. Taking a deep gulp of his drink, Gray smoothly slides a crumpled note across the table. He silently complains about having to use such a roundabout method just to get in touch with his contact. Leaving the tavern behind, he follows the hidden instructions to a secluded meeting spot. An underground broker greets Gray warmly, noting how incredibly unusual it is for the adventurer to visit him. Cutting straight through the pleasantries, Gray firmly demands the broker investigate a specific matter. He orders the man to discover the current status of a Kodal orphanage and track down the missing children who lived there. Assessing the request, the broker warns that investigating such a massive area between Kodal and Storia will be quite expensive. When Gray presses for the price, the broker demands a hefty fee of 400 gold coins in total. Without a moment of hesitation, Gray agrees to the exorbitant price. Securing the deal, the broker states that gathering the information will take him a few days. Chuckling nervously, the informant promises not to run off with the massive advance payment. Unfazed by the joke, Gray coldly threatens to hunt the man to the ends of the earth and kill him if he tries to escape. Sweating under the murderous intent, the terrified broker decides he had better investigate as thoroughly as possible. Stepping back into the daylight, Gray heads toward his next destination to pick up his new charge. Arriving at the inn, the inn master mentions that the young lad upstairs had been anxiously waiting and worrying about being abandoned. Acknowledging the delay, Gray is directed to head straight up to the boy's rented room. Along the way, Lena happily greets the towering adventurer and asks what brings him by today. Gray explains he is here to collect Olis, surprising Lena as she realizes they are acquainted. Confirming the boy is moving in with him for now, Gray curiously asks if the kid has been bothering anyone. Lena assures him the meek boy is not a bad person, but she awkwardly stops herself just before calling him gloomy. Deeply embarrassed by her slip of the tongue, Lena quickly excuses herself to get back to cleaning. Approaching the designated door, Gray knocks firmly and is quietly invited inside. Stepping into the room, he apologizes for the long wait as a hesitant Olis nervously speaks up. Looking incredibly insecure, the young boy quietly asks Gray if he really comes across as gloomy. Realizing the kid overheard the entire hallway conversation, Gray internally regrets ever asking Lena about him. Walking through the city, Gray tells a silent Olis not to let things get to him as they shop for everyday necessities. Olis remarks that it has been a while since he went shopping, having only moved between his room and training in Storia. Spotting a local fruit stand, Gray points to the display and asks the young hero if he wants some apples. Olis fondly recalls that while the hero received high-class meals, the small fruits given at his orphanage somehow felt like a much bigger luxury. Suddenly feeling embarrassed by his own nostalgia, Olis timidly asks Gray if his feelings sound weird. Gray smiles warmly and states the simple truth that food eaten with family is always delicious. Realizing the profound truth in those words, Olis relaxes his shoulders and lets out a genuine laugh. Gray internally reflects that ever since he met the kids, he cannot help but eagerly look forward to mealtimes. Declaring he is capable of anything to protect this blessed lifestyle, Gray happily decides to buy the apples. Returning to their bustling house, Ariamel warmly welcomes Gray back and politely assumes the boy beside him is Olis. Hesitating at the door, Olis quietly apologizes for the intrusion before stepping into the warm home. Ariamel cheerfully offers to prepare tea and invites the nervous boy to make himself comfortable in the living room. Turning to Ariamel, Gray asks her to gather everyone in the living room so he can properly introduce their new guest. Olis stares in absolute shock, asking Gray if that girl is truly Ariamel, the one Storia designated as the Saintess. Gray fiercely confirms her identity, firmly declaring that she is a highly precious member of his family. Overwhelmed by the revelation, Olis stands frozen in stunned silence as the weight of the situation fully sets in. Gray gently breaks the tension, encouraging the hesitant boy to come further inside and meet the rest of the household. Noting Olis' heavy guilt over being involved in the plot to abduct the Saintess, Gray resolves to help the boy clear the air eventually. The formal introductions begin as Asuka and Fio politely bow and state their names to the new arrival. Olis immediately tenses up, staring intensely at Asuka the moment they lock eyes. Gray observes the sudden tension, wondering if the awkwardness stems from their destined relationship within the original game. Breaking the heavy silence, little Nina quickly trots over to inspect the newcomer. She circles around Olis, carefully scrutinizing the unfamiliar boy from every possible angle. Leaning in close, the curious toddler begins sniffing the stiff and deeply uncomfortable hero. Desperate for a rescue, Olis shoots a pleading glance over at the towering adventurer. Pretending not to notice the silent cry for help, Gray internally apologizes because he wants to watch the amusing interaction just a bit longer. Nina suddenly runs back to Gray, excitedly declaring that she is now Olis' big sister. Gray stares down at the proud toddler in sheer, unadulterated confusion. He struggles to process the bizarre logic, slowly piecing together that Nina actually considers herself the older sibling to the teenage boy. Despite breaking down her reasoning, Gray completely fails to understand how she reached this hilarious conclusion. Nina proudly points directly at Olis, firmly declaring that he is her new little brother. Olis lets out a bewildered gasp as the tiny toddler confidently assigns him his new family role. When Gray asks why she is the big sister, Nina matter-of-factly explains that she came to the house first. Gray finally understands her adorable logic, realizing she bases seniority entirely on the order they joined the family. Laughing at her absolute confidence, Gray wholeheartedly accepts the toddler's flawless reasoning. Ariamel calls everyone over for tea, prompting Gray to note the children's wildly varied reactions to their new guest. He observes that Ariamel and Fio are surprisingly dry and indifferent about the legendary hero sitting in their living room. Meanwhile, an already quiet Asuka remains completely silent, refusing to talk to the unfamiliar boy while munching on snacks. Stella and Lutz, completely unattached to strangers, have already lost all interest and moved on from the awkward encounter. Finally, Gray watches in pure amusement as a conflicted Nina seriously debates whether or not to share her precious snack with her new little brother. Nina happily takes a bite of the food offered to her. Gray thanks the girls before turning his attention to Aless, instructing the young boy to pick out a room for himself. Noticing the boy chose a room at the far end of the hall, Gray asks why he isolated himself, reassuring Aless that he doesn't need to worry about bothering the other children. Aless politely replies that being at the end of the hall is actually really soothing for him. Hearing this humble response, Gray gazes at the boy and silently marvels that this quiet kid is actually the chosen hero. Accepting the boy's choice, Gray asks Aless to join him outside for a bit once he finishes settling into the room. Startled by the sudden request, Aless quickly agrees and follows the imposing adventurer outside. Stepping into the daylight, Gray internally resolves to help the boy become as strong as possible in their limited time together, knowing Aless will likely leave once his orphaned friends are located. Shifting his focus to combat training, Gray asks if the boy can use magic, only to learn that Aless cannot cast spells despite being assigned an instructor in Storia. Tossing a wooden training sword to the boy, Gray readies his own weapon and commands Aless to take his stance for a sparring match. Wanting to properly evaluate the young hero's current strength, the veteran adventurer orders Aless to attack without holding anything back. Standing his ground, Gray reflects on the grim reality that the terrifying Dark Lord will eventually appear to threaten the world. Aless unleashes a fierce battle cry and charges forward, prompting Gray to block the strike while pondering how best to prepare the boy for his fated battle against the darkness. Parrying another strike, Gray decides the simplest solution is to bestow every single adventurous skill he knows onto the young hero. Observing the boy's incredible speed and sharp instincts after only 3 months of training, Gray notes that his linear movements and lightweight strikes are his biggest weaknesses. Suspecting the boy subconsciously holds back out of a reluctance to hurt his opponent, Gray firmly tells Aless that he needs to get used to the brutality of combat. Having seen enough of the boy's current capabilities, Gray lowers his wooden sword and officially calls an end to the sparring session. Catching his breath, Aless respectfully agrees as Gray instructs him to prepare for a trip to the Adventurers Guild tomorrow morning for official registration and real quests. Panting heavily, the young boy curiously asks if Gray is really a B-rank adventurer, which the towering man casually confirms as a B+. Still processing the overwhelming gap in their skills, Aless asks if every B-rank adventurer is as terrifyingly strong as him. A sudden flashback grips the young hero's mind, showing the cruel Holy Knight Lundy brutally beating him down during a past training session. Oblivious to the boy's dark memories, Gray casually replies that the strength of B-rank adventurers wildly varies. Trapped in his painful memories, Aless remembers how Lundy would constantly mock, beat, and spit on him during abusive mock battles meant to confirm his abilities. The trauma deepens as Aless recalls Lundy blaming him for his own weakness, leaving the boy to wonder why he was violently torn away from his loved ones just to suffer. Sensing the deep trauma lingering in the boy's eyes, Gray mentally confirms that brutally executing that abusive Holy Knight was absolutely the right move. Tears welling in his eyes, Aless desperately asks if becoming a strong adventurer will finally allow him to reunite with Mia and his other friends. Struck by the boy's heartbreaking plea, Gray hesitates, knowing that this is an incredibly difficult question to answer honestly. Gray silently acknowledges that the chosen hero will absolutely become strong enough to surpass him in the near future. He knows their reunion depends entirely on the information broker's findings, silently vowing to slaughter any slave owners if the orphans have been sold off. Realizing that any promises he makes right now would just be empty consolation, Gray carefully considers his next words. Opting for encouragement, Gray assures the boy that they will reunite and urges him to focus entirely on getting stronger for now. He firmly adds that Aless must seek strength for his own sake rather than his title as a hero, prompting a determined nod from the young boy. His resolve hardened, Aless respectfully thanks Gray for the intense sparring session before heading inside to clean up for dinner. Turning back toward the house, Gray suddenly spots young Isuka nervously peeking out from behind a wooden pillar. Startled by being caught, Isuka stammers anxiously as he asks about his and Fio's scheduled training session for tomorrow. Cursing his own poor planning, Gray awkwardly explains that he will be questing and training with Aless until dinner tomorrow. Hearing the delay, Isuka drops his gaze in utter disappointment and dejectedly accepts the news. A sharp pang of guilt pierces Gray's chest, making him wince at the unbearable sight of his adopted son's heartbroken expression. Desperate to fix his mistake, Gray quickly promises to train Isuka and Fio right after dinner, reminding them to bathe beforehand. Instantly beaming with pure joy, Isuka loudly agrees to the new schedule. Directing the boy inside for dinner, Gray silently vows never to use Alessa's urgent training as an excuse to neglect his other children. Bursting with pride, Isuka happily brags to his father that he actually helped prepare tonight's dinner. Chuckling warmly at the boy's enthusiasm, Gray affectionately ruffles Isuka's hair with his large hand. Stepping into the dining room, Ariamel sharply asks if Gray washed his hands, causing the adventurer to freeze in guilty realization. Absolute chaos erupts as Isuka panics over the sand in his hair and Nina demands her own head pats, leaving a flustered Ariamel to aggressively wipe Isuka's head while scolding Gray for his dirty hands. Gray fails to hide the previous night's accident as Ariamel brings up Lutz wetting the bed. Concerned about midnight bathroom trips, Ariamel asks if she can temporarily sleep in Gray's room to help care for the younger children. Gray quickly rejects the idea to spare her the extra burden, suggesting he could simply use enhancement magic to sprint the toddlers to the toilet himself. Their private conversation is suddenly interrupted as Ollis quietly opens the door. Spotting the two standing closely together in the room, Ollis freezes in utter shock and embarrassment. Morning arrives over the peaceful city as birds chirp outside the lively household. Working side by side in the kitchen, Ariamel cheerfully thanks Gray as he hands her a fresh tomato for breakfast. Hearing movement at the doorway, Gray turns around to see Ollis nervously lingering in the kitchen. Visibly flustered by their proximity, Ollis stammers out an awkward morning greeting. A heavy, bewildering silence settles over the room as the boy stares at them in deep confusion. Ariamel urges him to go wash his face before the food gets cold, sending the flustered boy stomping away in a panicked rush. Greeting the cooks, Theo asks why Ollis sprinted past her in such a hurry, though Gray admits he has no clue. When Theo asks about last night, Ariamel innocently confirms she slept in Gray's room to help the little ones with nighttime potty duty. Theo brushes off the matter and heads upstairs to wake Isuka, leaving Gray to realize that Ollis definitely jumped to a wild misunderstanding. Shrugging off the morning drama, Gray turns his focus back to the stove. The pair smoothly returns to finishing the massive family breakfast. Noisy footsteps echo as Theo rouses Isuka, while the groggy younger children slowly wander downstairs. A chaotic kerfuffle erupts by the washbasin as the half-asleep toddlers get their faces cleaned. Despite the hectic start, the entire household gathers warmly around the table for a lively morning meal. Ariamel gently cleans Nina's face while Theo sternly scolds a sluggish Isuka for his slow behavior. Taking advantage of the distraction, Stella sneakily pushes the vegetables she dislikes onto Lutz's plate. Gray smiles at the energetic chaos, reflecting on how lively his mornings have become compared to his solitary past. Sitting quietly among the bustling family, Ollis eats his meal in deep thought. Breaking the boys' brooding silence, Gray firmly calls out Ollis' name across the table. Gray instructs the young hero to stay behind and help him wash the dishes once breakfast ends. He explains that living in this household means pitching in on family chores together. Proudly embracing her big sister role, little Nina enthusiastically volunteers to help Ollis carry all the plates. Reassured by her eager support, Ollis agrees to handle the cleanup duty alongside the children. Leaving the dishes to the cleanup crew, Ariamel transitions to preparing packed lunches for Gray and Ollis. Ollis silently nods, beginning to adjust to the rhythmic warmth of family life. With chores completed, the duo prepares to head out into the city. Walking down the street, Gray suggests that Ollis register as an adventurer under an alias to avoid potential church manhunts. Gray advises him to pick carefully, warning that an adventurer's registered name remains a permanent identity for life. Ollis reflects deeply on the instruction, realizing the significance of choosing his new identity. Gray hands him a newly purchased short sword, explaining he reserved his old blade specifically for Isuka. Arriving at their destination, Gray presents the grand entrance of the Adventurers Guild. Gray tells him to head inside and register immediately so they can tackle several quests before the day ends. Directing Ollis to the registration counter, Gray steps aside to inspect the quest bulletin board. Gray surveys the wall of requests while adventurers chatter loudly around the guild hall. Planning to test the boys' combat prowess against hobgoblins or orcs, Gray resolves to build up Ollis' achievements under his watchful eye. Pondering the guild's dynamics, Gray acknowledges that Aless must start as an E-rank rookie and that any veteran who suddenly invites a novice cannot be trusted. He confidently notes that common town nuisances will not dare bother the boy while a high-ranking adventurer like him stands guard. Gray realizes that a pack of wolves would be the perfect challenge for Aless, but their strong survival instincts mean they will actively avoid the overpowering adventurer. Startled from his thoughts as Aless calls his name, Gray ironically concludes that his own massive strength is actually hindering the boy's growth. Approaching with his new guild card, Aless announces his successful registration while Gray notes the boy kept his real name. Gazing softly at the card, Aless explains he refused to change his name because it is the only gift he possesses from his faceless parents. Absorbing the heavy sentiment, Gray offers a quiet nod of understanding. Shifting the focus to work, Gray suggests a standard goblin extermination quest and asks if Aless has experience, to which the boy confidently confirms he has fought goblins and even orcs. Suddenly, the noisy chatter of the guild is interrupted when a rude adventurer aggressively demands to know why Gray brought a brat. The arrogant man loudly mocks the veteran, sneering that a lonely Gray must have desperately tricked a rookie into joining him. Unfazed by the insult, Gray ruthlessly claps back that he is simply training an apprentice and insults the instigator's sheer blindness. Pushing the verbal counterattack, Gray sarcastically laments how pathetically low the level of a self-styled B-rank party leader has become. He aggressively exposes the man's cowardice to the entire room, revealing how the supposed leader recently went weak in the knees over a mere elder orc's severed head. Utterly humiliated, the stuttering leader is swiftly dragged away by his annoyed party members who urge him to stop wasting time. A bewildered Aless asks about the strange encounter, prompting Gray to dismiss the loudmouth as a desperate attention seeker who always picks fights. Watching them leave, Gray internally chuckles at the realization that the man was likely just trying to brag about his very first Elder Orc quest. Approaching the front desk, Gray introduces his new apprentice to the receptionist, who smiles warmly at the young rookie. The receptionist happily reassures Aless that with a powerhouse like Gray watching his back, a simple extermination quest will be an absolute breeze. Handing over the approved quest forms, the cheerful staff member waves them off and wishes the duo a safe journey. Leaving the safety of the city walls behind, the two adventurers venture out into the untamed outskirts of Barstoke. Marching through the open wilderness, Gray suddenly freezes in his tracks and firmly orders Aless to halt. A tense silence falls over the pair as a suspicious rustling noise echoes from the nearby foliage. Peering through the dense bushes, 3 grotesque goblins are revealed silently prowling through the shadows. Impressed by the boy's sharp instincts in spotting the monsters, Gray grimly notes that the creatures are marching directly toward Barstoke. Formulating a lethal ambush, Gray commands Aless to wait until the targets are close and execute them before they can scream for backup. Gripping his blade tightly, the young hero offers a silent, determined nod. Bursting from the brush with blinding speed, Aless mercilessly slaughters the ambushed goblins in a flurry of precise strikes. Flicking the foul blood from his steel blade, Aless nervously turns back to ask his mentor for an evaluation. Gray praises the boy's massive improvement, noting that Aless swings without any hesitation when fighting monsters instead of humans. Deeply awed by the veteran's sharp analytical skills, Aless praises Gray's amazing observation. The young boy confesses his terrifying fear of hurting humans during practice, contrasting it with the total emptiness he feels when slaughtering beasts. Gray bluntly warns that Aless will eventually need to learn how to cut down human enemies, before suggesting they move on since these goblins were clearly just scouts. When Aless naively asks if they can just ignore the horde since Barstoke is too large to attack, Gray aggressively counters that the goblin scum would absolutely target vulnerable children. A dark, protective fury burns in the adventurer's eyes at the mere thought of innocent kids being hunted. Staring into the wilderness, Gray definitively declares that every single goblin must be completely eradicated. Shifting the burden onto his apprentice, Gray casually commands Aless to do the killing, leaving the boy utterly shocked. Peering over a steep cliffside, they spot the massive enemy encampment, prompting Aless to nervously point out the sheer size of the horde. Scanning the valley below, Gray tactically identifies the enemy leadership, pointing out a goblin general flanked by warriors and hobgoblins. He chillingly concludes his brief tactical assessment by counting roughly 50 regular goblins swarming the camp. Outlining a reckless strategy, Gray plans to assassinate the elites and buff his apprentice with magic, leaving a terrified Aless to slaughter the remaining 50-foot soldiers alone. Aless thinks he gets it, suggesting they let the goblins run away to reduce the number of enemies they have to fight. Gray immediately corrects him, aggressively ordering Aless not to let a single one of them escape alive. Gesturing forward through the rustling brush, Gray simply tells his companion that it is time to go. The noisy, chaotic chatter of a massive hidden goblin encampment echoes through the dense forest. Startled by a sudden disturbance, the goblins shriek in confusion and turn toward the intrusion. Announcing that he smelled their filthy goblin stench, Gray confidently challenges the horde to come at him and play. A furious swarm of goblins screams and charges violently at the human intruder. Swinging their crude weapons wildly, the shrieking monsters rush forward from all directions. More goblins pile into the frenzy, crying out in bloodthirsty rage as they close the distance. Gray stands completely unfazed, holding his ground as the vicious green swarm barrels toward him. A massive goblin general suddenly lunges forward, unleashing a devastating, heavy strike. Reacting instantly, Gray yanks his body backward to narrowly avoid the weapon's deadly arc. Dodging the clumsy blow with ease, Gray casually taunts the massive monster for being far too slow. Fluidly dropping his stance, Gray sweeps a brutal low kick directly into the general's thick leg. The heavy impact buckles the general's knee, violently slamming the beast into the dirt as Gray looms over it. Shocked by their powerful leader's sudden fall, the surrounding goblins shriek in absolute terror. Despite losing numerous subordinates, the goblin general stares up at Gray without a shred of personal grudge. Noting the pure warrior-like expression on the beast's face, Gray realizes the goblin general is actually delighted by the fierce battle. Gray reflects grimly that these brutal creatures have also slaughtered countless humans during their violent lives. The monstrous general locks eyes with his opponent, fully embracing the raw thrill of a deadly fight. Gray understands perfectly that to goblins, human concepts like morality or mercy are completely non-existent. Their entire brutal existence is solely dedicated to endlessly increasing their foul numbers. With a twisted grin, the general charges forward, proving that killing humans holds no deeper meaning beyond pure instinct. Suddenly, an explosive magical blast rips through the smaller goblins, sending them flying with terrified shrieks. One goblin explodes into bloody splatters as another cries out in sheer panic from the devastating ambush. Moving with blinding speed, a glowing blade slashes straight through the chaotic goblin ranks. Aless relentlessly carves his way through the panicked horde, violently slicing down screaming goblins left and right. Marveling at his own surging power, Aless realizes this incredible speed is the direct result of Gray's physical enhancement magic. Expressing mild regret that he cannot watch Gray's fight, Aless refocuses on violently slaughtering the fleeing goblins to ensure none escape. Slicing through the fleeing monsters from behind, Aless silently admits that fighting so ruthlessly against proper knights would earn him a cowardly reputation. A heavy thud echoes across the clearing as the goblin general's severed arm violently hits the ground. Gray stands victorious over the massive, dismembered beast as dark blood violently sprays across the grass. Staring down at his defeated foe, Gray calls the creature a weirdo for still looking completely thrilled even after having its arm lopped off. The dying general lets out one final, strained breath before finally succumbing to its massive wounds. Looking across the blood-soaked battlefield, Gray confidently decides to leave the remaining hobgoblins entirely to Aless. Watching Aless efficiently slaughter the remaining beasts, Gray praises the boy's surprising skill despite his total lack of practical combat experience. With a final, swift slash, Aless brutally executes the very last remaining goblin. Exhausted and groaning, Aless dutifully agrees when Gray orders him to go around and gather all the severed goblin ears. Turning around, Aless drops his guard and confusedly asks Gray what he is doing making strange clattering noises over the massive corpse. Flicking his bloody knife, Gray explains that while they are not as valuable as an elder orc's, the goblin general's testicles will still fetch a very high price. Utterly horrified, Aless stammers in sheer shock as Gray cheerfully advises him to remember this lucrative tip for the future. A sickening scraping sound aggressively echoes across the quiet clearing as Gray casually goes to work on the corpse's lower half. Averting his eyes in sheer disgust, Aless hears a wet snap and grimly realizes that was probably one of the testicles popping off. Chuckling darkly to himself in the dense forest, Gray ominously remarks that a severed goblin head will make a fine souvenir. Standing alone amidst the slaughter, he silently wonders who exactly he should give the gruesome trophy to. Gray asks Olis if he finished collecting all the goblin ears, prompting the eager young hero to confirm he just finished gathering them all. Gray realizes this is a terrible situation because letting Olis report the massive kill count will make the guild think he brutally threw a rookie into a monster pack. When Olis curiously asks what is wrong, Gray quickly decides to handle the guild report himself and apologizes for the sudden change of plans. Ignoring Olis' confusion, Gray commands him to kill time by grabbing a glass of milk at the guild's bar, dreading the scolding Sasha will inevitably give him. Back at the guild counter, Sasha furiously berates Gray for tossing a brand new rookie into a pack of vicious goblins. As Sasha glares suspiciously at the claim that a total rookie wiped them out, Gray insists that giving Olis all the credit for a first-day rank-up is the absolute truth. Gray defensively mutters that he did provide support, sweating nervously as Sasha continues to glare holes through him. Sasha drops a severed goblin warrior ear onto the counter, raising an eyebrow at the supposed rookie's ability to kill such a dangerous monster. Deciding to put the impressive kill in Gray's official assessment instead, Sasha notes that Ollis will still rank up regardless of the warrior kill. Knowing the assessment is meaningless for his current rank, Sasha smoothly asks if the towering adventurer is finally going to take the promotion exam this time. Completely unfazed by the prospect of advancing, Gray flatly rejects the idea and states he simply isn't interested. Meanwhile, a lone adventurer slams his mug down onto a wooden table in the crowded guild hall. He loudly boasts about single-handedly taking down an elder orc, showing off a massive, jagged scar on his chest as supposed proof. Unimpressed by the drunken stories, a group of smug adventurers surrounds a terrified Ollis, aggressively offering the rookie a spot in their party. The intimidating men box the boy in, leaving him completely paralyzed by their sheer, overwhelming pressure. Watching the scene from a distance, Gray silently mocks the terrified boy's pathetic reaction and debates whether or not to step in and save him. Gray internally notes the sheer irony that Ollis was utterly fearless when slaughtering goblins just hours ago, yet is now crying for help against basic adventurers. Stepping into the fray, Gray calls out to his companion and tells him it is time to head home, prompting a frantic Ollis to eagerly agree. The bullying adventurers instantly freeze in absolute horror, sweating profusely as they realize the rookie they cornered is actually with the infamous Gray. Swiftly dragging Ollis away from the terrified men, Gray internally complains about the boy tugging frantically on his jacket. Standing outside Gray's house, a heavily sweating Emilia clutches a small box and intensely regrets getting involved in Karsha's ridiculous plan. Emilia silently curses Karsha's cruelty, agonizing over what to even say when suddenly delivering a random souvenir out of the blue. Mumbling frantic greetings to herself, the flustered Valkyrie leader paces nervously while desperately trying to rehearse a casual greeting. Her panicked rehearsal is suddenly shattered as Gray suddenly speaks from behind her, causing her to shriek in sheer terror. Watching the elite A-rank adventurer flail around like a panicked suspect, Gray wonders what the royal family would think if they saw the Valkyrie leader acting this suspiciously. Recovering her composure, Emilia clears her throat and awkwardly asks if the boy standing next to Gray is the famous hero of Storia. Emilia formally introduces herself to the rookie, prompting a grateful Ollis to introduce himself as a brand new adventurer in the town. Refusing to stand outside any longer, Gray casually grabs the doorknob and invites the flustered woman inside. The heavy wooden door creaks open to reveal a surprisingly quiet and empty entryway. Ariamel nervously steps out from the shadows, stammering a welcome while Gray deduces she was too scared to interrupt Emilia's highly suspicious pacing outside. Snapping out of her nervous daze, Ariamel quickly offers to take Gray's empty lunchbox while he asks her to prepare tea for their new guest. Handing over his metal lunch tin, Gray smiles warmly and praises the young girl for another delicious meal. Staring blankly at her empty hands, Ariamel quietly asks where Ollis' lunchbox went. The children excitedly rush into the entryway to greet Emilia, completely ignoring the awkward tension as they marvel at the beautiful adventurer. Emilia quickly explains that Karsha is busy getting advice from the other members today, nervously shifting the conversation to avoid the topic of the missing lunchbox. Handing over the delicate box she brought, Emilia quietly explains it is a sweet souvenir for him to eat with the children. Gray accepts the cake and warmly invites her to join them for tea, sending the secretly thrilled Valkyrie leader over the moon with happiness. Ariamel cheerfully announces the tea is ready, while a completely oblivious Gray heads to the kitchen to gather plates and forks for their guest's special cake. Stepping up to help, the eager girl insists she will get the dishes. Gray silently marvels at Aria's formidable domestic skills as she reveals she has already prepared the snacks and plenty of tea. Aria politely directs their guest Emilia to take a seat, prompting Emilia to scratch her head awkwardly. Calling everyone to the sofa for cake, Aria announces the treat while a younger sibling volunteers to fetch a less. Emilia desperately tries to help, but Aria politely refuses to burden a guest, leaving Gray to note Emilia's strange behavior since the expedition. Conflicted and unsure of her place, Emilia fidgets nervously with a soft hum. Suddenly, a small toddler ambushes Emilia with a tight hug around the leg, startling the seasoned adventurer. More children quickly swarm Emilia, playfully patting and clinging to her. Emilia briefly mistakes their actions as rejecting her help, but Gray reassures her that the kids are simply thrilled to have her there. Stunned by how fast the kids set the table, Emilia watches in awe as Gray finally announces it is time for cake. The room fills with a warm, lively atmosphere as the entire makeshift family digs into the delicious dessert. Gesturing gently, Gray calls one of the toddlers over to wipe some stray cake off their messy face. He kindly asks if the treat is tasty, earning an enthusiastic nod from the happily munching child. Emilia watches with deep fascination as Gray softly smiles and expresses his gladness at the child's joy. Chuckling warmly, Emilia catches Gray off guard by stating that he is really acting like a true father. Seeing his flustered reaction, she quickly waves her hands to clarify that she doesn't mean it as an insult or a surprise. She smiles softly and confesses that she has actually never seen the imposing adventurer more in his element. Interrupting the tender moment, the toddlers excitedly demand that Daddy show them more attention and share his cake. Gray mentally resigns himself to the adorable demands, admitting he doesn't mind sharing his portion. Yielding to their pleading eyes, he happily agrees to give them a bite just this once. Offering his fork, Gray playfully tells Stella she can only have half of the delicious bite. Caught up in the generous mood, another sibling enthusiastically offers to share their slice as well. Arya smiles at the sweet gesture but gently reminds the kids that they still need to save room for dinner. Chaos suddenly erupts when Theo mischievously snatches a bite of Asuka's cake, causing the boy to shout in surprise. Panicking over the sudden commotion, Emilia frantically offers up her own cake to soothe the situation. Little Nina steps right up to Emilia, causing the nervous guest to wonder what the toddler wants. Nina unleashes a devastatingly cute smile and thanks her big sister, causing Emilia to completely short-circuit from the sheer adoration. Gray mentally praises Nina for effortlessly conquering Barstoke's strongest adventurer as Emilia stutters out a euphoric reply. Later that evening, Emilia happily plays cards with the kids, though Gray silently notes her terrible luck with constantly pulling the joker. Realizing it is getting late and nearing bath time, Gray casually invites Emilia to stay the night. The sudden invitation catches Emilia completely off guard, leaving her stuttering in shock. Flustered and waving her hands, she immediately declines the offer and insists she really must head home. Instantly, the toddlers latch onto her arms, whining and begging their new friend not to leave them yet. Utterly defeated by their combined puppy dog eyes, a weeping Emilia caves in and agrees to stay, prompting a massive cheer from the victorious children.